The girl says that a boy is very interesting because he has just the right amount of madness, and that this insanity isn't just aimlessly directed but focused. Honestly, the boy thinks this is more of an insult, but she insists it's a compliment. Eventually, she asks if the boy desires power, to which he admits he couldn't say no. She rephrases her question, asking if he wants more magic. Then the young man enthusiastically replies, yes. Suddenly, the same boy is awakened by a maid. He gets up from the table where he was sleeping and notices he's at a lavish party, not exactly sure where he is as he only remembers having a drink after work. Confused, the boy goes to a mirror and screams when he realizes he is just a child. His scream attracts everyone's attention at the party, and then a man states that Liam may be the fifth son, but he is still a member of the Hamilton family and as such should show composure. With that, the maid mentions that the boss is in a good mood today, though Liam doesn't see it that way. She explains that this is because the Earl of Hamilton has finally had a daughter after many sons. Therefore, the girl wishes Liam would enjoy his sister's party. Clueless, the boy wonders if this is all a dream. Then he wakes up in a bed in the same body and realizes it wasn't a dream. The maid knocks on the door and says she has brought his clothes. While being dressed by the maids, the boy reflects that the owner of this body was named Liam Hamilton, the fifth son of the Earl. Yesterday's party was a celebration for the birth of the youngest daughter, but Liam has no idea why this is happening. After getting dressed, he goes to one of the mansion's balconies and is amazed by the size of the yard, especially when the maid tells him that all the land he can see belongs to the Hamilton family. Then he meets Bruno, the fourth son. Bruno wants his sister to marry someone from the royal family, as it would provide security for the Hamiltons even though they are on the verge of being ousted. Their father and the eldest brother, abridged, are anxious to make everything work out. Liam asks what this talk of being ousted is about, and his brother reminds him that this was the nation's decision, as all noble families must accomplish something every 3 generations. Otherwise, they lose their status. The moment their father, the third head of the house, nominates one of the sons to be his successor, the Hamiltons will become commoners. Naturally, the family heads are desperate to remain nobility, but Bruno is pleased to see the flow as it should be, so he can do whatever he wants. Besides being 12 years old, Liam needs to start thinking about the future. At that moment, a man enters the room and announces that it's time for magic class. Liam can't hide his excitement and gets up to celebrate, asking if they study magic around here. Trying to understand his brother's strange behavior, Bruno mentions that the family has grimoires in the storage, but the boy shouldn't get too excited. After all, only 1 in 100 people have an affinity for magic. Nonetheless, the teacher believes it's important to study what magic is. Without wasting time after class, Liam rushes to the maid he knows and asks her to show him the grimoires. She takes the boy to a library where he smells the books and walks through the shelves until he picks a grimoire on beginner's fire magic. After reading a section of a chapter, he focuses his mind and conjures a small flame on his index finger. The maid applauds the master's gift, as it was said it's rare for someone to possess magic in their being. After that, Liam goes to his father and asks to take some books from the library. Not paying much attention to the young man, the Earl allows it and sends him away as he's busy. After leaving, Liam doesn't like how cold the man is, but at least he got the permission he wanted. Thus, he lights candles in his room and reflects on how magic is the aggregation of knowledge. Knowledge is a weapon monopolized by kings and nobles, yet the young boy is in a position to study this art freely. The next day, he tests the flame cutter ability and is pleased to see he's progressing rapidly. In time, he intends to invoke these spells without the need for a book. A month later, he shows Bruno that he can use the flame cutter without a book in just a month. Astonished by his brother's rapid progression, Bruno takes the book in search of some hidden secret that explains this, but nothing seems out of the ordinary in that grimoire. Not wanting to fall behind, the fourth son reaches out to conjure magic but fails miserably and recognizes that his brother truly has the talent for it. After all, it usually takes a year for an apprentice to start using magic. Hearing this, Liam concludes that this body has an affinity for magic. Bruno points out that the boy can gain status in the kingdom with this gift and asks if he's studying this hard to become the heir to the family. Liam answers no, but still, Bruno only advises his brother not to become a target of abridged. Following this, after learning all the initial fire spells, Liam picks up the ice spell grimoire and is already excited for the next discoveries. In the meantime, the Earl calls his son in the hallway after finding out he can use magic. Therefore, he wants the young man to show it. Liam freezes the grimoire he's holding, but since this doesn't convince the father, he uses a fire spell without the help of the book. Now, Earl Hamilton is sure that the heavens have blessed his family and offers any grimoire the son wants. Hearing this, Liam is happy as he has never seen his father so excited. Subsequently, a staff member informs the Earl that heat has arrived. Immediately, Hamilton orders his troops to be gathered. Liam left there, frustrated, not knowing what was going on. But since his father had promised him any book he wanted, the boy tried to stay calm. Along the way, he met a man who asked if Liam was one of Hamilton's sons. When Liam introduced himself, the man regretted his previous actions, though he believed it was his destiny. Therefore, he told the young boy to do as he wished. Liam didn't understand what the man meant, so he asked if the noble youth had come to capture him. However, as the boy continued to be confused, the man gave up on the conversation and admitted he'd been a bit out of sorts lately. Noticing the boy's book, he explained that the best way to learn magic was through constant and repeated practice, but he mentioned there was a more efficient method. Liam was curious, so the man showed him his hand and conjured a different element on each finger. The boy was fascinated and wanted to know how this was possible. The mysterious man asked him to draw a circle on the ground with his right hand and a square with his left, all at the same time. As the boy performed the task perfectly, the stranger declared that this was the essence of what he wanted to teach. Then he asked Liam to try using different magics with both hands. The boy visualized flame cutter with his right hand and a fireball with his left. When he released both at the same time, even the mysterious mage was impressed, because this technique, called mystic, could only be used by 1 in a million. Next, Liam was tasked with summoning 3 spells simultaneously. He conjured flame cutter, fireball, and boiling ground, but the magics dissipated quickly, and he thought he had failed. However, the teacher said it was a success. All that was missing was the magical power that the students still lacked, especially since this technique consumed an absurd amount of it. To teach the young boy to control his magical power, the man drew prime numbers on the ground and mentioned that this method only worked with them. Meaning, once Liam reached the 4th simultaneous spell, you would encounter problems because those numbers aren't primes. After surpassing 4 spells due to his previous experience, he wouldn't get stuck on the 6, remembering that 6 is also a prime number. Likely the boy would get stuck on 9 due to the change from even to odd numbers. By the way, the mage cast 13 spells into the sky at once and claimed that was his limit. He could reach 16 with his magical power, but the prime number after 13 is 17, which is a significant jump. Regardless, the teacher asked the pupil's age, and upon hearing he was 12, declared the boy had a bright future ahead, because youth is a weapon, and the ability to heed others' advice is an even more powerful one. With that said, the tutor handed over a ring called Magipedia to the boy, which contained hundreds of grimoires within it. When Liam put on the accessory, he felt over 300 spells bubbling in his head. For this reason, he wasted no time and tested a wind spell. However, when he turned to share the experience with the teacher, he had vanished. At the same time, the maid arrived, scolding the boy for wandering so far because there was a suspicious man lurking in Hamilton territory. Setting that aside, the girl gave Liam a Conjuring for Beginners grimoire on behalf of the Count. Finally, she asked the boy to come back soon and said goodbye. When she left, the teacher reappeared out of nowhere and mentioned he had to hide with an invisibility spell, but he couldn't stay there for long, so he would teach one more thing to Liam. He asked the boy to open the grimoire and conjure something using the ring. Liam turned to the page of the fire salamander and performed the process. The creature appeared but entered the grimoire. Upon this, the teacher explained that the Magipedia absorbed the book's content. Impressed, Liam didn't want to accept something so special, but the man said that the ring itself wasn't anything special. It was just convenient not to have to carry tons of books on his back. Then he asked the boy to conjure more creatures, and Liam repeated the process 3 more times. However, when he looked around, the teacher had disappeared again, leaving the following message: continue studying magic. We will meet again somewhere. Please don't tell anyone about me. After reading the message, despite the brief time together and not knowing his name, Liam came to regard the mysterious man as his master. A month after the tutor's departure, the pupil continued studying and practicing his learning, reaching much more complex levels of spellcraft. One day, Bruno went to the forest to see his brother and noticed white coal with him, which burns at a much higher temperature than normal coal, besides not producing smoke and lasting much longer. Moreover, Liam was able to produce crystals that recover magical power, all with his magic. Bruno praised his brother and concluded that the kid would know how to get by without him, especially since Bruno was about to marry a woman of low nobility. Taking the opportunity, he mentioned a severe mistake their father made right after Liam was born. The Count wanted a daughter so he could marry her off to someone from the royal family and maintain the Hamilton status. However, since Liam was born male, the Count became desperate for achievements and sent 1,000 men to kill a powerful monster sealed in these lands. However, the army suffered a severe defeat and lost 90% of its regiment. Because of such things, Bruno was sure the Hamiltons were about to crumble, so Liam needed to find a way to lead his life independently, just as Bruno was doing by getting married. Following the advice, Liam sold the items he had crafted and earned good money to finance his independence. Afterward, he satisfied his hunger with ramen. Noticing that the noodle was popular around these parts, he had an idea. Then he went to his mate and showed her a simple recipe where he just added sauce to the dry noodle, removed the moisture with magic, and boiled it with hot water. Soon he started calling this dish instant ramen, also known as big noodle. Excited, Liam tries to sell his new product, but the first merchant explains that only the eldest son of the Hamiltons can conduct business on these lands without prior authorization. Frustrated, Liam leaves only to find out that Albrevet, the eldest, had instructed the merchant to say so, fearing what his brother could achieve with his magic. Meanwhile, Liam considers leaving his father's lands to start his business. To do this, he conjures an inventory to store his resources. Then he summons a contract. According to the young man, there are two types of summoning magic: spirit and contract. The latter summons living creatures that become servants to the summoner. However, Liam is about to use this contract magic on himself. When he does, he celebrates the successful creation of an illusory clone, which he uses to travel in his stead beyond the Hamilton lands. Several days later, the original Liam receives various items in his inventory from the clone. This item box can be used simultaneously by both at a distance. Thus, the original produces the resources and the clone sells them outside the Hamilton territory. With this, Liam is convinced that he will achieve his independence. Not only that, this is perfect for him to train magic because now Liam can make his duplicate imitate the magic he's casting, doubling the damage. In the midst of one of these training sessions, Albrevet shows up to see how his brother is doing, having heard that the boy has been making impressive progress lately. Therefore, the eldest asks what the fifth brother wants to be when he grows up. Upon hearing this question, Liam immediately senses trouble brewing and makes it clear that he does not want to be the heir and take the place of the eldest. With this in mind, he says he wants to become independent soon and find a job that allows him to eat well. Considering this, Albrevet decides to introduce Liam to the Hunters Guild. Later, when he arrives at the guild, the hunters find the presence of a child amusing and start mocking the boy, laughing loudly. But Liam ignores the taunts and goes straight to a man at the reception. The man says he's heard of the young Hamilton through Albrevet and that he will need to pass a test to be accepted into the organization. Of course, something easier, because sending the Count's son to his death would cause a huge problem. Having said that, the receptionist asks Liam to use an attack spell he's mastered, chanting the incantation calmly. However, Liam admits he doesn't even know what an incantation is, so the receptionist tells him to attack directly. Before acting, Liam laments that his illusion is active, which greatly reduces the power, but with no other choice, he performs the attack. The result leaves everyone speechless, as most there had never seen such a spell before. Without much thought, the test supervisor says he can give a C-rank license, but then corrects himself and upgrades it to B rank. Leaving there with his new license, Liam wonders about the strength of B rank. In the midst of this, a girl approaches him and asks if he's a Hamilton. Liam confirms, and then the girl introduces herself as Asuna Awakens and invites the boy to hunt with her, saying it's safer in a group. Despite the girl's somewhat goofy manner, Liam likes lively people and accepts the invitation. On their way to adventure, Liam notices they haven't taken any mission. Asuna explains that only A-rank hunters and above take hunting jobs. B-rank and below go after dangerous creatures, like the wolves they just encountered, to defeat and collect a reward. Despite the initial confidence, Asuna realizes there are far more wolves than she thought and concludes that they're in trouble. Even so, Liam conjures the gnome ability, creating several little monsters that get bitten by the wolves. However, the gnomes swell and jam the wolves' jaws, preventing them from letting go. With this done, he asks Asuna to act and she finishes the fight. Soon the two return to the guild and impress the hunters with the 42 wolves they defeated. Taking advantage of the feat, the guild chief offers them another job. Shortly after, on the way to the new mission, Asuna is happy because they were hired directly, showing they've been recognized. The mission is simple: defeat a giant caterpillar before an important person passes by. About the monsters, Liam explains that they have magical stones in their bodies which allow them to use magic or advanced techniques. Compared to common beasts, they are much more dangerous. Today, Liam isn't using his illusion to save strength for this challenge. Later, after a long and exhausting battle, the two were just worn out. The carnivorous caterpillar was so resilient that no attack, not even the spells, could penetrate its carapace. Therefore, they retreat without accomplishing anything. Honestly, Asuna just wishes a meteor would fall on the creature's head. Hearing this, Liam gets an idea. After explaining the plan to his companion, the duo returns to the fight. Asuna lures the monster while Liam conjures his item box. As soon as he finishes, he pulls out a giant rock from the inventory and drops it on the insect, leaving Asuna terrified. Not just her. When they return to the guild, they leave everyone in disbelief. After all, they didn't just bring back the carcass of one carnivorous caterpillar, but two. Liam explains that he found the second with the enemy search spell. Finally, with their excellent performance on the mission, the guild chief offers a reward 5 times the initial amount. Several days later, Abridged appears to his younger brother and says he was right to recommend him for the Hunters Guild, asking him to keep up the effort. When the man leaves, Asuna confesses she didn't much like his manner. Internally, Liam reflects that, to the eldest, the brothers are all nuisances. Setting that aside, it's time to receive the important person who was mentioned earlier. After all, the caterpillars were eliminated just to clear the path for this individual. When the man takes a look at the two, Asuna gets all excited, thinking that if they catch the attention of someone important, she and Liam could move up in life. Indeed, the man was very interested in Liam, so much so that he requested a meeting. Soon after, the protagonist is face-to-face with James Stanley, who, surprised to learn that Liam is the son of Charles Hamilton, asks about his relation to Raymond. Liam is lost, so the old man explains that Raymond is the owner of the ring he's wearing and wants to know if the boy killed the mage and stole the item. Distressed by the accusation, Liam stands up and says very seriously that he received the ring from his master. James bursts out laughing because it's just like the mage to get himself into the most dangerous possible situation and still find a disciple. With that, he asks Simon, the butler, to stay put and orders Liam to attack the man with the best spell he has, using full force. Despite the strange request, Liam doesn't back down, and when Simon raises the magical shield, the boy focuses to do his part. Researching incantations, Liam discovered that reciting one can temporarily increase the mana limit you can release. For him, the best words are the names of the singers he's always loved: Amelia, Amelia, and Claudia. After chanting these names, he launches 11 magical missiles at the target. Afterward, he realizes that his limit with the incantation rose from 7 to 11. The last missile breaks Simon's shield and hits him squarely. James is pleased with the boy's power and announces that he will knight him, making Liam independent, which leaves the young man completely shocked. After knighting Liam, James tells him there's nothing specific left for him to do, but being freed from dealing with his older brother should be enough. Despite this, the Earl might have mixed feelings about his son's title, as he'd likely want to use Liam's powers for the family's benefit. Aware of this, Liam feels uncomfortable, but James explains that he can still contribute in other ways because his merits as a Hamilton also belong to the family. With that said, the old man remarks that Raymond loves playing tricks and asks if Liam has ever fallen for any of them. On this matter, Liam shares that once he commanded the item box to absorb an entire lake, and among the collected items he found a waterproof letter from Raymond. In it, the master stated that if the apprentice was reading this, it meant he had mastered the item box. Since the box doesn't absorb gold bars, the wizard had scattered 100 kilograms of gold particles throughout the lake as a graduation gift for his student. Moreover, Liam should consider why the master had specifically chosen 100 kilograms, as this was part of the graduation test. Initially, Liam thinks Raymond chose 100 kilograms because that was what he managed to produce in the item box himself. After hearing the story, James comments that the gold is just a distraction and that Liam's real gift is hidden nearby, so it wouldn't be too easy to find. With this in mind, Liam returns to the lake and absorbs all the water again, looking for any clue about the so-called real gift. Upon reflection, he realizes that the item box wouldn't have absorbed gold bars along with the water, so he decides to refill the lake only with the particles. When he does, the gold activates a magical circle, which opens an underground passage. Down below, next to a book, Liam finds another letter from his master. Liam, this is your true graduation gift. I give you this grimoire of high-level spells. I myself couldn't use it, but I hope you can. Then the boy reads the book's title, Otherworld. Although he's not exactly sure what spell this is, Liam Hamilton spends the entire day trying to figure it out. When night falls, he summons a low-level light spirit to serve as a lamp. Despite his utmost effort, he still hasn't managed to cast the spell even once. However, he knows there's no need to rush, and that he just needs to follow the steps in the grimoire precisely. Sometime later, Liam returns to the same secret passage and finally summons a portal using the Otherworld magic. Fearless of what might be on the other side, the young mage steps through the door and finds himself in an all-white cubicle. He discovers that this spell creates a space in another world, the size of which depends on the summoner's skills and mana. Moreover, without the creator's permission, no one else can enter. Once fully mastered, the spell allows for the storage of items without them disappearing like an item box, but with a difference: living beings can enter the space. Thus, one could build a house inside or anything else one's imagination can conjure. Given this, Liam deeply thanks his master. A month later, Liam and Asuna face a giant frog. During the fight, he summons his salamanders to attack, but realizes that fire doesn't work against the monster. Quickly, Liam pulls Asuna into the other world as the frog begins to release a massive electric discharge. Safely inside the portal, the two wait for the surge to pass before launching a joint attack that ends the battle. Afterward, they bring the magical stone from the frog to the guild. It was an A-rank job, and once again, the branch chief is impressed, praising Liam extensively. Meanwhile, Asuna realizes she's never the focus of these situations. She laments not being as strong as her friend and fears being left behind in the future. Hearing this, the chief suggests she sign a contract to become Liam's servant, explaining that depending on the master's performance, the familiar's skills also evolve. Liam finds this odd since it would give him power to command over the girl, but Asuna trusts him completely and doesn't mind. Thus, the two take the proposal seriously and perform the establishment of the contract. As soon as the pact is completed, Asuna disappears suddenly and reappears behind Liam. She explains that at the moment of the contract, she heard a voice saying that her special ability, Speedster, had been awakened. On the other hand, Liam wants to test this power with someone, and Asuna already has someone in mind to help. She takes her friend to Jody, a veteran hunter who agrees to participate in the experiment. Upon arriving at the guild, Jody catches everyone's attention. She looks in the mirror and comments that this special ability she's feeling seems quite nostalgic. Curious, Asuna asks what the veteran's special ability is. Then Jody disappears for a while and comes back with 2 sandwiches, offering one to a man with an injured arm. When he takes a bite, his arm regenerates completely, leaving everyone agape. Several days later, James Stanley informs Liam that Her Highness, Princess Scarlet of the Jamil Kingdom, is coming. She's interested in the young man. James explains that the boy has been very successful in A-rank jobs at the guild despite being only 10 years old, in addition to being capable of using 11 spells at the same time and having the power to evolve and rejuvenate his familiars. Therefore, the princess is curious, especially about the familiars, and wants him to do a demonstration. However, Liam flatly refuses, saying that his friends are not circus monkeys. With no other choice, James sends the boy away. After he leaves, James apologizes to the princess, who is actually there all along disguised as a maid. Scarlet then wonders if Liam will have the courage to refuse the proposal in front of her. The next day, Liam is dropped off by a carriage in front of the mansion of the all-powerful Scarlet Sherry. He is struck by the number of soldiers guarding her door, realizing how important the first princess is. Inside the throne room, he introduces himself while the princess orders a chair to be brought for the guest. Without mincing words, she wants to know how the young man defeated the carnivorous caterpillars and the giant frog. If that's all he'll talk about, Liam sees no problem in sharing. After hearing the story, the woman is impressed to learn for the first time that someone has killed a giant frog without using high-level spells. She asks if it is also the first time James Stanley has heard of this, and he admits that it is because powerful magic is usually employed. Changing the subject, Scarlet asks the guest to show his familiars to her. Internally, Liam feels the overwhelming pressure from this aristocrat's authority, but declines the offer so as not to yield to it. Scarlet loses the smile on her face and questions if the boy will really refuse her request. And he reaffirms that he will because he doesn't want to turn his companions into a spectacle. Hearing this, the princess laughs, and amused by the young man's entertainment, she grants him the title of Baron. Confused, he comments that he did nothing to deserve this, but the woman replies that amusing her twice is enough, and that's far better than giving away a daughter in marriage. Besides, she gives Liam a familiar contract grimoire, and this gift indeed brings uncontrollable joy to the mage, which greatly intrigues the monarch, as he prefers the book to the noble title. After this meeting, Liam examines his new book and imagines that until he masters its content, his familiar contracts will dissolve if he's not with the grimoire. At this moment, Bruno comes to celebrate with his brother on being named a baron, though he thinks that Albrevet must be fuming by now. Indeed, Liam has earned a higher title than their father, as the nobility of this nation is divided between those of the first generations who achieved something on their own, and those who merely inherited titles. As Liam is among those who conquered, he holds more value. At night, when the fifth son returns home, Albrevet passes him in the corridor and tells him to wait for what's to come. Thinking alone about this, the eldest son does not understand how this kid has been gaining so much attention lately. By the way, 2 maids were discussing Liam's great deeds recently. Annoyed by hearing this, Albrevet asks why they don't go work with the 5th son, since he's so great. As the 2 apologize, he directly asks who they think is the best, him or Liam. Terrified, of course, the women respond that Albrevet is the best, so he walks away and promises to himself that he will achieve something, because if that brat can do it, certainly he can too. In the morning, the men of the kingdom are enchanted by the beauty of Baron Liam Hamilton's familiars. Jody calls the Baron master, and he does not understand why. She explains that they have a master-servant relationship, but the boy insists on being called by name. Even understanding the boy's requests, Asuna comments that he looks very much like a master because of his attitudes. Seizing the moment, Jody admits that her heart beats faster when she's near him, leaving the men who were drooling over the two quite irritated. Finally, Liam asks if the two are in agreement to form a group, and the three shake hands to seal the decision. Later in the forest, Jody hits a wolf with an arrow, while Asuna strikes another with her sword. Liam praises Asuma's improvement in movements, and she smiles back. Jody realizes that she can see much better than before, which is crucial for an archer, as an archer's vision is as if their life depends on it. After hearing his friend's comment, Liam casts his development ability on her, enabling her to see even farther. Asuna asks what Liam did, and he explains that he applied his spell to enhance Jody's eyes. Excited, Asuna asks if he can do the same for her. But the boy thinks it's not a good idea because although he can enhance Asuma's attack power, it would also increase the burden on her body, like when someone punches something and ends up breaking their own bones. However, if it's just an upgrade in vision, that's fine. Upon hearing this, Asuna gladly accepts, while Jody, using her newly enhanced vision, hits a wolf at an incredible distance, and the two familiars give all the credit to Liam for his incredible magic. In the late afternoon, the trio returns to the Hunters Guild and sees a big commotion. Asuna asks a man what's happening, and he explains that the eldest Hamilton's son messed up. Another man shouts that after breaking the seal, Albrevet failed miserably, so Liam remembers when his older brother told him to wait and see. For this reason, he believes he is to blame and rushes out of the guild. Inside the forest, several soldiers are being removed from battle due to severe injuries. When Liam arrives there, he sees that Albrevet is weakened and approaches to see how his brother is doing. Terrified, Albrevet screams that he will not fail. But the guild master of hunters strikes him on the back and orders him to be removed, as he will no longer support this useless rivalry between young masters. Regarding this, Liam emphasizes that he is also responsible for this tragedy, but the man asserts that he is not. Asuna asks what's inside the forest, and the master explains that the demon dragon Raiden was sealed nearby. Liam's great-grandfather sealed the beast, but the seal was undone. He knows how to seal the dragon again and has gathered people for this, but the Raiden Jr.'s offspring of Raiden are preventing it from happening, and they were the ones who caused this disaster. Since the offspring are capable of doing all this, Liam can only imagine when the father enters the fight, but the guild master explains that the adult was sealed for too long and needs a few weeks to recover its strength, so they need to seal this winged monster before that happens. Speaking of the dragons, the three hatchlings appeared beside their father, toppling other warriors along the way. Asuna noted that the young dragons were the size of a medium-sized dog and shouldn't pose much of a problem, so she attacked one. In response, the dragon hatchling spat fire, melting an entire tree in the blink of an eye, which made the girl retreat as a precaution. Liam cast the 7 magic missiles, but the 3 dragons easily repelled the magic with their fire. Realizing they couldn't defeat these foes, Jody insisted they escape as quickly as possible. Liam acknowledged these 3 dragons were stronger than he had anticipated and urged Asuna to grab Jody and use her sprinter ability to get out of there. As they left, the mage summoned his item box and retrieved his grimoire to recite his chant Amelia, Amelia, Claudia. He then conjured a portal to another world and hurled the dragons inside. After that, the boy knelt down and took a deep breath, his life having hung by a thread. Meanwhile, the guild master approached Liam, impressed that he had defeated the Raiden Juniors. When night fell, the kingdom's mages united to begin the sealing of Raiden, the demon dragon. Asuna and Jody returned to the master and inquired about the spell he had used against the monster's offspring. Liam explained that it was the Another World ability used to create an alternate space. Even with an enchantment, it was difficult to activate, but once triggered, it could store living creatures within. In this case, Liam had locked the 3 Raiden Juniors inside. Asuna asked if they could survive in there, but the boy told them not to worry. Since he hadn't yet mastered the spell, the things he placed inside tended to disappear on their own. Noticing that it wasn't an attack spell, Asuna praised the boy's cleverness for managing to trap the dragons there. Suddenly, a voice emerged from nowhere, calling for the tiny human of the Great Soul. Soon, Liam found himself in an environment where he directly faced the demon dragon. When addressed this way by the boy, Raiden realized this was how humans referred to him, but he wasn't concerned with all these definitions humans use, since in a few hundred years they would call them something else. By the way, Raiden asked who the tiny one with the Great Soul was. Liam introduced himself as an ordinary human, but the dragon argued that the boy's body and soul were not in sync. Thinking to himself, Liam figured the dragon must have discovered he was an adult in a boy's body and might even know the cause. Even though the human hadn't said anything, Raiden read his thoughts and replied that he didn't know the cause but would love to accompany Liam to see his life up close, for from what he observed, the mage led an interesting life. The dragon promised to do no harm. On the contrary, he would lend his strength to the small human, but only as much as needed for Liam to build his foundations with his own effort. Hearing such words, Liam didn't hesitate and accepted the offer, feeling no hostility from Raiden. Thus, Raiden announced he would rent Liam's great soul for a while and entered him. Done with that, Asuna drew Liam's attention to his hand. When he looked at his palm, Liam noticed a red mark. The master believed the young man had absorbed the demon dragon, while Liam felt an immense power from within. To test his new ability, he fired magic missiles into the air and 11 shot out without an incantation, something that had never happened before. Then Liam recited the incantation and repeated the spell. This time, 17 magic missiles were conjured and perfectly controlled by the caster. Around the boy, the other mages seemed to lose strength, so Raiden communicated with Liam, asking him to contain his mana as it was affecting the sorcerers. On the other hand, Misuna and Jody remained calm, guessing that it might be because they were relatives of the young baron. Finally, the Adventurers Guild Master thanked Liam for taking care of the demon dragon. Having said that, to the adult's surprise, a boy summoned his item box again and poured out 10 kilograms of gold dust as compensation for the trouble, with the largest amount designated for those injured in the battle. Grateful for this, the master amused himself that if Liam were the head of the Hamilton family instead of Albrevet, everything would be better. When night arrived, Charles, Liam's father, thanked his son for fixing the mess Albrevet had made. Liam asked what would happen to his brother, and the Earl explained that the eldest son would be confined at home for a while. Liam knew the worst punishment could have been expulsion for Albrevet. Charles emphasized that Lord James was still in town and that the story would spread throughout the nation and Liam was likely to be rewarded for it. However, despite his father's words, Liam felt guilty for his brother's behavior and went to his brother's room door to say something, although he didn't know what to say. Inside, Albrevet was screaming that the Hamilton family was ruined because the demon dragon had been defeated by Liam, who wasn't even their family, and that he was the one who should have sealed the creature. After hearing this, Liam gave up on talking to his brother and pondered that, in the end, Albrevet was the one who most wanted to protect the Hamilton family. That night, the young baron woke up and remembered having a strange dream where he practiced new magics that probably came from Raiden, the demon dragon. Excited by this new possibility, he ran to the forest where he usually trained to reproduce the 2 spells he saw in his dream. The first emanated a sensation similar to that of another world, and with enough practice, Liam felt he could master it. Hours passed, and the boy learned the magic and summoned a Raiden Jr. Suddenly, Princess Scarlet arrived and was impressed by the sacred magic the young man had used. For resolving the situation with the dragon, she awarded him the 3rd-class Phoenix insignia, a decoration celebrating the birth of a new hero who defeated the demon dragon. But for that, Liam needed to tell his story so it could be written down. The problem was that for some reason, when the Baron told the story, the princess told him not to tell anyone else about it. The next day, Liam received 3,000 gold coins from the princess, and the boy understood this as Scarlet wanting to buy his silence. Indeed, the very next day, young Liam found himself grappling with this situation as James Stanley boldly asked if he had mastered the art of sacred magic. Scarlet had paid for the boy's silence, and it really showed as he struggled to respond. Noticing the change in his mood, James remarked that Liam was still young, and that the princess's hefty reward made it all the more suspicious. Now, having defeated that dragon was an achievement grand enough to secure Liam's place among the nobility. Normally, Scarlet would return to the capital to report this to the king, but she hadn't, which only raised further suspicions about her behavior. Hearing this, Liam broke into a cold sweat as the man added that, according to reports, witnesses claimed the gigantic demon dragon transformed into light and was absorbed by Liam. Cornered like this, the boy threw in the towel and confessed to having learned a few sacred tricks on the sly. Knowing the truth, James asked the young man to demonstrate, so he conjured a beginner's spell called All Clear, capable of removing all evils, including poison or petrification. Witnessing such power, James understood why they say sacred magic is the work of God. Seizing on this topic, he told Liam about the War of the 3 Dragons. Once 3 dragons waged war, and one emerged victorious after defeating the other 2. Legend has it that sacred magic was the decisive factor in this conflict. The victorious dragon allied with the human who used this magic to establish the kingdom of Jamil, where they reside today. Thus, considering that Raiden had allied with Liam, it could mean that the young baron was recreating the founding myth of this kingdom. With this in mind, James was apprehensive about 2 things for the future. The first concerned the Hamilton family involving Liam's father. This family had become nobility by sealing the demon dragon, but it wasn't actually that dragon, but rather the kingdom's founder. If this were to come to light, the Hamiltons could lose their noble title immediately. Nonetheless, there was an even bigger issue. If the dragon was angered, it might plan to seek revenge on the nation for being imprisoned without cause. Upon hearing these words, Liam recalled something Raiden had said. "I don't care about all these definitions humans come up with. In a few years, they'll call me something else." Reflecting on this statement, the boy asserted with conviction that the dragon harbored no desire for vengeance against humanity. Moreover, Raiden had shown a genuine interest in Liam's life. Given this, James began to truly believe that Liam was the kingdom's savior. After the meeting, the Baron remembered he should have activated spells that took time to initiate. Even if they proved useless, it would be good practice. Returning to town, the protagonist was accosted by his relatives at the guild door. The adventurers were thrilled to see it was that boy, while Jody assured everyone she would tell him. They took the young man aside and explained that since the news of Liam Hamilton's victory over the demon dragon had spread, many wanted to work with him. Asuna handed him a list of candidates to join his group, and the boy was overwhelmed with so many names. Of course, the girl warned that most were merely looking to capitalize on the Baron's success, so it was crucial he assess each one carefully. With the list in hand, Liam returned home to discover he had received hundreds of marriage proposals. Speaking of which, Bruno jokingly remarked that he was late, but he had brought a proposal from a relative of his fiancée's family, as he was responsible for persuading his brother to marry her. By the way, Bruno asked what the heck he had done to become so popular, and Liam replied that he had simply defeated a demon dragon. However, Bruno was sure there was more to it, since even the wealthiest families were interested in marrying someone to him. At that moment, Liam remembered what James had said and figured he was in trouble with so many doubting him. Nonetheless, the boy just realized he had never been so popular until he took on this body of a young noble. Later, he showed his relatives his spell Otherworld and transported the two to a house built on the other side of the portal, which the city's carpenters had constructed and the Baron had stored in his item box. Asuna asked if everything disappeared when Liam undid the spell, as he had mentioned what happened with the Raiden Juniors, but he explained that this was no longer the case since he had mastered the spell. With that, he showed the interior of the residence to the two friends, who were delighted by its coziness and the practicality of being able to carry it anywhere they went. Despite their joy, Joby wondered if there was any concept of lighting in this alternate space, so Liam acknowledged that it must be difficult to sleep there, as there really was no night or day. Joby asked if it was possible to make everything dark, so Liam summoned a low-level shadow spirit, Shade, to envelop the space in darkness. At first, the entire place turned pitch black, then the mage conjured a fire salamander to light the fireplace. Jody asked if it was possible to make it even brighter, but as Shade was a low-level spirit, he was incapable. Hearing this, Asuna commented that it would be nice if spirits could grow like humans, and this gave Liam the idea to trigger a familiar contract spell with Shade. Upon doing so, Shade grew in size and gained a voice, thanking Liam for the opportunity to evolve to a medium level. Without delay, the spirit adjusted the environment to resemble a common night with a very natural darkness. In return for the vote of confidence, Shade promised to work with total devotion to Liam. The boy mentioned that, unfortunately, he had not yet learned any medium-level spirit summoning spells, so Shade pointed out that the ring the boy was wearing seemed to be an artifact of ancient memories, and that it would be fairly simple to store medium-level summoning spells in it, although it would require practice to master these techniques. With this in mind, Liam managed to store Shade and evolve the salamander, a fire spirit, who asked to be called Ifrit. It turned out that, besides doing this, the mage used the familiar spell to evolve low-level spirits of water, earth, wind, light, and ice, and recorded all of them in the memory of his Ring Magicopedia as medium-level summoning spells. Discovering he was capable of something so valuable, the boy couldn't contain his excitement and was eager to develop these spells as quickly as possible. The next day, he went to the forest at Raiden's request, searching the area where the dragon was sleeping. Raiden asked the human to summon one of his offspring, and when he did, the little monster distorted the reality around them, revealing a world completely different from what could be seen with the naked eye. In this place, fairies flew around a flower-filled field, and upon noticing a human's presence, they fled in panic. Liam hurried to explain that he was not an enemy and that he had been sent by Raiden, using the dragon hatchling by his side to prove he was an ally. With this, the fairies realized that the young man was on the side of the dragon god, and he added that Raiden himself had asked him to protect them. According to the winged beast, fairy wings are a valuable material for crafting magical artifacts. Without help, this race would have long been extinct due to their fragility, and Raiden had been protecting them with a barrier. Now it was Liam Hamilton's mission to continue this defense, so he announced he would cast a spell on them. Raven explained that the boy should name them while doing so, and that naming things is a primitive spell that any human can use as mana naturally participates. Thus, Liam used the contract spell, family on one of the fairies, and began calling her Reyna. With this, Reyna evolved into an elf, and the dragon explained that by naming familiars in the act of contracting them, the mana resonates more intensely and produces a more powerful result. Therefore, Liam should always name a familiar when practicing this bond. Without delay, the boy applied the same procedure to all the fairies, who became elves and started calling him Lord Messenger. Rena asked what should be done now that they were his familiars, so Liam suggested they build a village to live there and named Rena as the village chief. With this decided, the elves gathered to start the construction, while Liam felt mana coming from inside the forest and headed in that direction. He reached a tree with a glowing fruit and asked Rena what it was. She explained that fairies collect small amounts of mana found floating in the air and gather it in one place. Raiden taught that Liam could eat this, so he followed the command and realized that his mana was not only fully restored, but by casting magical missiles, he managed to summon 19 projectiles, more than his limit until then. The next day, he returned to the village to see how things were going. Rena called him Lord Messenger once more, but Liam confessed that he preferred to be called by his name. Soon, the elf notified her companions about this, and later showed that they had even tried to build their houses, but as could be seen, it didn't go very well. After all, they weren't masons. Amidst this, the group heard screams from an elf who was being violated by a group of men who came to plunder what was left after the battle against the demon dragon. They tried to kidnap the elf, so Liam ran to intervene. One of the thugs attacked the mage, who responded with the magical missiles. When the other bandits advanced, the boy summoned his copy and doubled the missile launch. After winning the battle, he reflected that this place was too dangerous to leave them loose, so he planned to keep everyone inside the other world, although it was too small for so many people. However, as soon as he took a look at the alternate space, he noticed that its size had increased significantly for some reason, and you believe it was because he ate the fairy nectar. Soon he used this spell to teleport the elves to his territory, where they need not worry about bandits. In light of the assistance the human had offered, the girls knelt and asked him to become their king. Liam warned that he could not become king for several reasons, but he accepted to lead this group well to help as much as he could. Already thinking about the responsibility that came with it, Liam pondered that he needed to find a place for these people to live. Days later, he prepared an extra-large pot of pasta for the troop and practiced activating a new high-level holy spell he received from Raiden while they ate. The problem was that he had been training for 4 days and still couldn't activate it, but his persistence managed to achieve his goal. Pleased with his friend's achievement, Raiden taught that now he just had to imagine his destination, and Liam confirmed that his copy was already there. Then he teleported the elves 100 kilometers from where they were to a place called the Sealed Lands. Once there, Raiden asked the boy to raise his hand with a crest. Done that, the illusion seal was broken and a spectacular field was revealed, where the young man could found a new nation alongside the elves. Before anything, it was necessary to find a water source to develop life in that environment, so Liam summoned Windine, the water spirit, and evolved her with a familiar contract so she could produce a water source. With that, Windine built a river in the territory so that the inhabitants could live around it. Next, the human mage developed his summoning magic of the Raiden Juniors and reduced the time needed for its activation, using the Lecro crystals to recover the mana he spent. Moreover, he also practiced teleportation extensively. From now on, the casting is immediate, meaning Liam Hamilton finally mastered this technique and could teleport freely. With these new achievements, the boy left the Raiden Juniors protecting the elf village while he was not present. Next, he met with Princess Scarlet, who wanted to know if the dragon inside Liam mentioned anything about the Promised Land. He responded that not exactly, although he did say something about the Sealed Lands. Raiden had left a group of elves under his responsibility and asked that they be brought to this territory that the winged beast personally sealed. Scarlet asked if Liam could take her there, and he promised that he would, but he had a request to make first. In the following scene, the princess introduces Golek, the court engineer, and the mage uses a familiar's contract to create a copy of him for the construction of the village. When the boy takes the princess to the village, she thinks it's Galar Valley, but Liam explains that Raiden used a spell to make it appear so, though it isn't. With that, she wonders if this is the Promised Land, but the mage clarifies that Raiden made no promises to humans. Upon hearing this, Scarlet recalls the legend that humanity would be saved from collapse and taken to the Promised Land. Then she retrieves a royal family relic called the Key of Destiny, and this ring is accidentally activated, causing the land to levitate. With this discovery, the princess is certain this is the right place. Therefore, she bows before Liam, the master of the Promised Land, and asks him to create a new nation that will be paradise. Aware of his responsibility, Liam began work in that territory with the help of the seasoned engineer from the royal court. Meanwhile, the mage was honing his spells and could now cast 17 magic missiles at once, along with the Holy Spirit, which inflicted great damage on targets. With this power, the young man cleared the area of monster threats. Scarlet made a point to admire the hero's capability and insisted on being called by her name, not Your Highness, as Liam usually addressed her. After all, from now on, she was his servant, not the other way around. Liam replied that the position of the first princess was too lofty to assume such a role, and Scarlet emphasized that dragon blood flowed through her mother's veins. Because of this, women in her family with such blood were often married into royalty, and Scarlet, being one of these women, wished to serve the dragon god Raiden. With that said, Raiden informed Liam that he needed to travel north for a kilometer, as there was something there that would please the young princess. Upon reaching the specified area, the pair discovered the entrance to what seemed like a ruin. Inside, as Raiden explained, there was a guardian modeled after the appearance of the god, and humans needed to defeat it. Liam asked how to bring down the beast, and Raiden told him that its name was written on the head of the mold in an ancient language, and that if the boy erased one of the letters, the inscription would change to obey. Scarlet pointed out that it was the second letter from right to left, commonly known in Brazil as penultimate. Without hesitation, Liam flew towards the indicated letter and cast a spell that erased it. With this, the dragon became obedient to Princess Scarlet's dragon blood, who decided to oversee the beast's recovery since Liam's spell had wounded it. Leaving the ruins, the boy pondered alone that he still wasn't used to a princess serving him, so Raiden thought it best that the mage gain the power and status necessary to feel worthy. After this conversation, the mage returned to the village, which was under construction, but what he saw was the scene of a place almost entirely destroyed. Elves ran towards the master and reported that they had been suddenly attacked by werewolves until a pack of these monsters appeared before the wizard, demanding that the outsiders leave this sacred land, otherwise they would be torn to pieces. Liam wanted to discuss this, but he was attacked before he had any chance for dialogue. The leader of the wolves swiftly lunged with its claws, but the human managed to escape and counterattack with a shock spell that immobilized the opponent for a while. Controlling the situation, the mage reinforced his desire for a friendly conversation, but summoned a junior Raiden in case the wolf did not cooperate. Seeing such a conjuration, the werewolf was astonished, as these canine beasts were a clan that expelled invaders at Raiden's request. Liam explained that the elves were precisely a people protected by the dragon god, so the wolf felt guilt for having caused the destruction of this land. Yet Raina showed compassion and stated that everyone there were companions serving the same god, and it would be great if the werewolves also signed a contract with Master Liam Raiden as a way to square loyalty. The young mage was puzzled by this talk of Liam Raiden, but let the game continue. Regardless, the wolves accepted the terms, so the humans signed a contract with the pack leader, naming him Chris. However, to everyone's surprise, despite having a deep voice, Chris appeared as a woman when she evolved, a mix of human and wolf. Later, with the addition of the evolved werewolves, the construction of the village progressed rapidly, and the leader committed to doing everything possible to repair the damage her group had caused in the region. Speaking of which, Liam thought it would be much easier if he could speed up this process with some type of magic, so Raiden advised that since the boy did not have this spell, he could create one that would serve. Liam was excited by this possibility as he did not know it was feasible, while the dragon taught him to just imagine what he wanted to do and how to do it, visualizing the process and its outcome clearly. After all, everything in the world exists by causality, that is, cause and effect. Following the indicated steps, Liam cast the Maintain Memory spell on a wooden beam and asked Chris to try to break it. She split the beam in half, but it immediately regenerated and kept the structure intact. Thus, Liam managed to create the Maintain Memory spell, which memorizes non-living objects in their form at a certain moment. Faced with something so fantastic, the she-wolf hugged the master with excitement, while Raiden emphasized that Liam was a very interesting human. By the way, after learning how to create spells, the mage developed the magic missiles, evolving them into power missiles. Raiden instructed the human to continue at this pace of creation and emphasized that he must build a nation to learn things about the world, because once established in the territory, the little man would learn many things, whether he wanted to or not. Curious about the process of creating magic, Liam asked who was the first person to do this, as he could not understand how it would be possible to create something based on nothing, since at the beginning of everything there should not have been something to inspire from. Thinking about this, the boy imagined that it might be possible to create spells without depending on causality. Hearing this, Raiden burst out laughing and responded that it was fun to follow this boy. However, the atmosphere of relaxation was interrupted when Reno approached and informed that humans were attacking the fairies. With that, Liam hurried to the reported location and found a battalion of horse-mounted knights. The leader of them asked if the boy lived there, then the young man remembered the responsibility he had over this area in light of the elves and Scarlet's pleas to make this territory a nation. Soon, he responded to the warriors that this was his nation. Finding it amusing, the leader asked the name of this nation, but as the boy did not know how to answer, he said that this must be some kind of child's play and ordered the battalion to move on. But Liam cast the 17 power missiles in a straight line as a warning that they would not pass. Unsatisfied, a warrior attacks the mage, who teleports behind each enemy and forces them off their horses. Finally, he demands that the men never return to this place. On the way back to the village, Liam states that he has resolved the issue, so Rana reveals that fairies seeking protection there because their village was attacked by humans. Next, it's time to make contracts with each of the fairies who form an organized queue to wait their turn. At one point, Liam runs out of names to think of, but he pushes through stubbornly to the end. At least this resulted in an increase in available labor, which further accelerated construction. Inside his house in the other world, the leader shows his closest companion the helmet of a knight he had defeated earlier in battle, asking if they know where this equipment is from. Scarlet says it belongs to the Duchy of Palta, which, like the kingdoms of Jamil and Quistador, borders the Promised Land. Moreover, it's likely that more soldiers will come from these three regions as they were separated by this valley, but since the Promised Land has been restored, all territories are now connected. Regardless of the grave threat, the princess insists that a country must be founded in this region and it must have three things to thrive: land, population, and power. Of these, Liam already has the land, and the population is increasing as news of this foundation spreads. In other words, only power remains to be sought. Regarding this, Chris promises to use all his strength to protect the Promised Land, while the princess advises the master to continue expelling the invaders mercilessly. So they will realize that it is better to be an ally of Lion Raiden than an enemy. However, the day after this meeting, something turned the situation upside down. A noble Marquis from Jamil, Leonardo Berkeley, informs that the king of his region, Lorenzo Chu, wishes to make an alliance with Liam. If he accepts, the king of Jamil is willing to offer Princess Scarlet as his bride. Unsure how to respond to this proposal, Liam creates a telepathy spell on the spot and asks Scarlet not to be alarmed by this news, as he wants to know what she thinks about it all. The princess believes the mage should accept because, regardless of their true intentions, just the fact of them marrying will buy half a year for them to think of something. Thus, Liam accepts the proposal, but asks for a year to develop his nation and prove to the king of Jamil that the decision was right. With that, Leonardo departs to inform his ruler. After this dialogue, Liam meets with his clone, and the two teleport to Scarlet's mansion in the royal capital, which, according to the boy, is even more luxurious than the Hamiltons'. First, he had asked Scarlet to bring his illusion there. Then the illusion itself brought the real Liam and left, as once Liam had arrived, he could always come back. In the meantime, Scarlet arrives and asks if this Liam is the real one. Confirming, she welcomes her master. The boy is eager toward the royal capital, having never seen it before, but the princess emphasizes that now he is the leader of a nation and should avoid being seen. Then she invites him to tea. Near the entrance, he senses the presence of Raiden, who, although only a trace of his power remains, mentions that he is still there. Liam asks if there is anything there that could date back to the times of the dragon god, so Scarlet takes the boy to a chapel dedicated to Raiden, the statue that has been passed down through Scarlet's family. By the way, Raiden asks Liam to use the all-clear spell on the statue. Once cast, the statue transforms into a light that enters the body of the first princess of Jamil, who immediately becomes capable of casting a holy spear. Seeing this, she kneels on the ground exhausted as the statue returns to its rightful place by withdrawing the light from the woman's body. Scarlet observes that all of her strength has been drained, and Raiden explains within Liam that this is a magical armor he created, which allows humans to expand their mana to the point where they can wield the powers of the dragon god. Among the three armors created by the dragon, this is the most powerful, known as the Golden Armor. Unfortunately, the other two disappeared during the war. Dissatisfied with this, Liam asks how they are made, then Raiden explains that first you must prepare a quantity of high mithril. Liam obtains this material from the princess and gets to work, and they create another armor. When Scarlet has the item ready in her hands, Liam informs through Raiden that the woman must form a contract with the statue by spilling her blood on it. Once done, the princess is enveloped by the magical armor and feels her body overflowing, and she launches a holy arrow to explore her newfound capability. Raiden explains that high-level magical artifacts are akin to living creatures, as demon swords and fairy blades are also such. Hearing this, Liam conjures a familiar contract with the armor, naming it Ares, the war commander. Feeling even more powerful, Scarlet throws a holy spear in the yard and destroys several trees. Amid this, Raiden mentions that he had already named an artifact to fight in the Three Dragons War. In this case, he created the Guardian Raiden, but never thought to make it familiar. Speaking of which, the boy asks for permission to try something with the Guardian, and Raiden grants it. Soon, Liam goes to the statue and observes that it has its own consciousness and can move freely. Upon shedding a drop of his blood on the artifact, the human seals a contract and equips the Guardian as armor. Thus, he also feels the power overflowing around his body. This time, when counting how many power missiles he was able to conjure, Liam realizes that 37 magical projectiles emerged from his hands, much more than he could previously. However, the armor consumes all of the human's mana and reverts to its original form as a guardian. Raiden reveals that Liam was the third person to survive after donning the equipment and the first to cast a spell. Given the potential the young mage has been showing, the dragon god believes that Liam will be able to master the use of this power, and consequently, the entire world will be in his hands. The next day, after absorbing the mana stones, the protagonist regained his strength and asked to borrow Guardian Raiden for a while. Starlet said he could and indeed should keep him. Grateful, the mage stowed the dragon in his item box and noticed how lifelike the creature seemed. Raiden agreed internally but emphasized that he was not. Finally, Liam informed the princess that he would return to the village, while she would stay in the royal capital but keep an eye on the events in the Promised Land. Subsequently, Liam teleported back to the village and returned Scarlet to the capital using the same spell. There, the people were still working tirelessly, smiles on their faces. After noticing that the first phase of the village construction was complete, Raina informed the boy that trolls, 3-meter-tall creatures of pure muscle, lived nearby. Liam recalled hearing that trolls' personalities varied greatly. They could be either gentle or extremely violent. Unfortunately, according to the fairy, these specific monsters were quite hostile and humans would continue moving in this direction. Liam thought it would be problematic if fighting broke out, and Raina considered persuading the trolls to join Liam's side in the war. At last, the mage inquired about the monster's whereabouts. Next, he appeared in a barren, seemingly lifeless land. The young man remembered this place being fertile not long ago. Picking up an iron ore stone from the ground, he looked around at the lack of vegetation, though he remarked that the area was full of hidden treasures. At that moment, trolls emerged in front of the boy, wanting to know what he was doing there. Liam explained that he was building a nation and would like to recruit them, but the leader of the monsters thought humans were untrustworthy and promptly refused the proposal. Liam asked for their trust and swore he would not harm anyone, pointing out that the fairies and werewolves had already joined him. Uninterested in listening to what the young man had to say, the enormous creature slammed his club into the ground, creating a small crater, nearly ending Liam's life if he hadn't escaped in time. The troll persisted and swung multiple blows that forced the mage to flee like a rat as he pondered how to turn the situation around, especially since this troll was as strong as the legend said. Not reacting might mean the end for the mage himself. By the way, as Liam dodged another strike, he found his legs caught in a crevice in the ground. Seeing the malicious smile on the monster's face, the human suspected he had been lured into this trap on purpose. When the troll raised his club and struck, everyone thought the fight was over. However, Liam emerged from beneath the rubble in his Guardian Raiden magical armor, still intact. The troll was incredulous to see that he had caused no damage to his opponent, but the issue was even deeper. Looking around, the troll chief realized that in his eagerness to hit the boy, he had accidentally injured his own allies, and Liam confessed he hadn't dodged the last attack to prevent the chief from hitting his companions. Normally, he couldn't summon so many spells, so he used the magical armor to boost his power and conjure more illusions to protect the other trolls. Hearing these words, the chief realized this child was kind, contrary to his initial belief, hence he promised to listen to what he had to say. Likewise, Liam began to think these trolls weren't as violent as Rana had thought. In fact, they might be the opposite. Either way, the chief wanted to know what the boy wanted with them, so Liam explained the process of building the village and how the troll's presence would be crucial for several reasons. According to the young man, the most important reason was that humans would probably invade this land, and if the trolls remained isolated, they would be attacked and likely lose this war. Honestly, the boy didn't want that to happen. Thus, the chief agreed to see the village before making any decisions, so Liam teleported everyone there. Upon being transported through this magical means, the monsters were absolutely amazed, having never seen anything like it in their lives. Suddenly, Chris appeared, pointing her finger at the troll chief, demanding to know what this brute was doing there. The chief recognized he was facing the boar woman, and Chris was furious, hating that nickname that made no sense. Consumed by rage, she delivered a flying kick to the troll, knocking the big guy down instantly. Concerned and unsure what to do next, Lamb asked what the relationship between the wolf and this man was, but Chris couldn't explain. Since she had met this troll, she found him annoying to the point that whenever they met, they would end up in a frank exchange of blows for no reason. In fact, counting all the fights they had, there were 307 victories and 378 losses for Chris. Therefore, she wanted to understand how the giant fell so easily to the ground, since he used to be much tougher in the past. Liam explained that the troll hadn't become weaker. Rather, the wolf had grown stronger after the familiar pact. Hearing this, the girl bragged that she had become the last cookie in the cookie jar overnight, and that she would no longer lose to a walking sack of muscle under these conditions. By the way, she recommended that the chief troll also make a familiar contract with the human mage to evolve. According to her, since he lost this duel, the big guy owed her a favor, and that favor would be the pact. With the troll accepting the terms, Liam began the process and named him Guy. Having done this, Guy assumes a more humanized form, and although he has shrunk in size, his power has increased significantly within. Taking advantage of the balanced situation, Chris wastes no time and dives into the second round. This time, however, Guy displays impressive reflexes and manages to protect himself masterfully, demonstrating that a single punch could bury an adversary beneath the earth. Although it's a casual duel between the two, Liam observes that this is a high-level battle. Guy's comrades witness their leader growing even stronger than before, declaring him a legendary Gagas, the natural evolution of trolls. Thereupon, Liam promises to do the same with all the new comrades, and as he transforms the trolls into Gigas, he celebrates the acquisition of more powerful allies for the protection of the village. Moreover, the species proved highly efficient in manual labor, as became evident when they began to assist in extracting heavy stones. Similarly, Chris tried to do the same work, but lacking their strength, it became quite difficult, and this was evident as the wolf girl struggled to move a bag with a massive rock inside. Guy asks her to take it easy and leaves the heavy lifting to him, until Chris is crushed by the stone she was trying to pull. The Gigas lends a hand and eases the girl's burden, who stands up angrily and says that he shouldn't think he has won just because of that, then storms off in embarrassment. Later, after transporting a large amount of stone back to the village, the troll's chief inquires about what the wizard intends to do with all this stone. He explains that he plans to extract metals from the stones, summoning Gnome and Salamander to melt the rocks in a forge and extract the metals. With this done, the nobleman secures portions of gold, copper, and silver, but primarily a large amount of iron. Unfortunately, besides these, almost no high mithril was extracted. Raiden explains that it is a metal very rare in the human world and hard to find, but Liam is still frustrated, hoping to find at least a bit more of this material in the troll's quarry to produce magical armors en masse. However, as he didn't have enough to create powerful armors, the boy announces that he might try other methods, although Raiden already makes it clear in advance that this could only result in failure. Either way, Liam thinks failing is no big deal, and this opinion provokes laughter in the dragon, who jests about the young man's outlook on life. In the end, for him, failing is not quite a failure, nor is it a success either. According to Liam, it's more or less how he views magic. You got to persist in handling it until you master the technique. With this motivation in mind, Liam has Salamander melt the iron and asks Gnome to make a mold to pour the molten metal into. Once done, Liam allows Raiden's power to flow through the mold. Remembering that Scarlet's armor became much stronger when given a name, the boy imagines he could repeat this process, even if it was with iron armor. Soon he names the equipment Apollo, meaning sun, thinking that giving a name that matches the mold could make the garment even more powerful. By the way, Liam also considered this when naming everyone in the village, giving names that matched the being in question, and it's curious to note that all evolved according to how they are called. Nevertheless, the young wizard manages to produce a magical iron armor, and even Raiden acknowledges it was a fantastic idea by the boy, who also managed to realize what he intended. Without a doubt, this young Hamilton is a great amusement in the dragon's life. In the late afternoon, the boy racks his brains thinking of other names he could use to strengthen more armors, as he cannot use the same name twice. Raiden observes that naming things is a primitive spell that any human can use, and Liam thinks that's exactly why it should lose strength when repeated in the same way. The next day, after straining his brains, he managed to produce 15 more armors and distributed them to 5 elves, 5 werewolves, and 5 gigas. During the first training session of the new armors, Guy and Chris go at it again, and Liam discusses placing these two in the same group since they love each other so much. Perhaps if they compete to see who does the best job, it might be the kind of internal competition that strengthens the results of the missions they are assigned to. However, the atmosphere becomes tense when a group of humans mounted on horseback appears at the scene, with malicious smiles on their faces upon seeing the presence of elves. Immediately, the men chase after them to sell all on the black market, but Rena stays calm and whispers something in Mina's ear. Mina gets the message and approaches the men slowly. They think the elf is surrendering willingly. However, she punches the leader of the humans in the face and subsequently knocks down a good number of his henchmen. Liam watches the scene with pride, as once the elves were so defenseless, but now they are capable of defending themselves from threats, especially if a good portion of them have access to armors like the ones he made yesterday. However, the leader of the bandits sneaks up behind the wizard and points a knife at his throat. Even so, Guy, Chris, and Reyna breathe a sigh of relief seeing that Liam is the hostage. The bandit shouts that he is serious and gets confused by the reaction of those creatures, until the boy launches a power missile down the man's throat and ends him on the spot. Terrified by such strength, the remaining humans flee hastily. After the victory, Liam entered the other world and performed a mass invocation of Celsius, instructing them to expel the seawater from the item box, separate the fresh water from the salt, and return both to the box. The elementals understood the request and carried out the process to increase the village's water supply for the new residents. Meanwhile, the first Windine that evolved into Celsius thanked her master for everything he had done, as her world had expanded to the point where she learned to possess human objects, but she feared reprimand from the Spirit King if she overused this ability. Liam was surprised to learn that such a king existed and was curious about what the elemental meant by possessing objects. She explained that a mid-level spirit learns to possess things, which is why there are so many pieces of equipment inhabited by spirit powers. With that said, Liam made a pact with Celsius and named her Celsius Zero. After the transformation, the mage produced another suit of armor and had Zero possess it. In the end, the process was successful, filling the young noble with pride. Following this, as he distributed the spirit-powered armors to his main allies, the boy grew even more excited to see that they were now capable of casting spells. The trio was thrilled with the strength they had achieved, although Chris and Rihanna were tired from the high mana consumption. Though tired as well, Guy promised to use all this power to protect the people, prompting the two to vow to do the same. In the midst of this, Liam pondered the incredible potential of mass-producing more mid-level spirit-possessed armors, as it would provide the strength necessary to protect the nation. Yet Raven thought the boy was naive because if these three superior species were equipped with the new magical armors, they would have the strength of an entire army, capable of overtaking another nation, and such immense power could be harmful if it fell into the wrong hands. The next day, Asuna and Jody complained that Liam had gone off somewhere without telling them where he was headed. The boy was about to explain what happened, but Asuna forgives her friend as long as he hands over the money to her. Confused, the young man is informed by Jody that it's the cash they asked him to keep safe. On the day that this happened, Liam took the girls to a chest brimming with treasures. According to him, they were paid to keep quiet about Raiden. Honestly, Asuna admits she would have stayed quiet even for free, and Jody adds that they have a contract with Liam, meaning if he wanted them to stay silent, they would obey. Liam clarifies that it isn't exactly like that, but decides not to argue. Either way, he shows them their share, and they are shocked by the exorbitant amount but ask their master to keep it, since they can't carry money around. Returning to the present, Liam wants to know what the girls plan to spend the money on, and the two share a mischievous grin. Sometime later, they emerge from a store with a book in hand. According to the familiars, it's the only grimoire in this town without an owner, and Liam might be interested. Soon after, the boy takes the book and flips through to a specific page, then emits magical energy towards the object, absorbing incredible spells he had never seen before. Thrilled with the discovery, he sincerely thanks his companions, who are just as joyful for being able to help. Later, at the tavern, Liam tells them that he's developing a nation, so they must decide whether to go with him or stay in the city, continuing as huntresses. Without any doubt, the women assure him they will join their master, for they are a family. Embarrassed and excited, Liam lowers his head and states he counts on them both. Fired up for the adventure, Asuna raises her fist and declares it's time to set off, but Liam puts a brake on the excitement, asking for a few minutes to master the grimoire he just received from his friends. With that, he summons the dust box to start a spell on every drawn line. As he observes, the activation time decreases each time the spell is triggered, and with this procedure, the young noble masters the necessary techniques. Asuna asks what kind of spell it is, and he explains that it's similar to the item box, where you can put as many things as you want inside, but it varies according to the user's mana. At that moment, a waitress arrives with the meal ordered by the group, and Liam sees it as the perfect opportunity to test the spell. He places a piece of fish inside the dust box and waits a minute before retrieving it. When he does, he shows the plate to the girls again, who are hit by a horrendous smell of rotten food. Having done that, Liam explains that this box is used to rapidly decay things. Honestly, the boy knows very well what this trash is for, but he has an idea when he sees the waitress carrying a bottle of drink. Shortly after, he reappears dripping with sweat and displays a bottle of freshly made grape juice. He places the juice and yeast in the dust box and waits 5 minutes. After the wait, he hands the bottle to Jody, who senses the velvety aroma of wine emanating from the neck. The girls are amazed to see this happen right before their eyes, while Liam reflects that, in addition to alcoholic beverages, this box can produce other fermented products like soy sauce and pickles on a large scale and in a short time. Hours later, to test the fermentation change according to the difference in time fermenting, the noble produced more juice bottles and numbered them from 1 to 10, then placed them in the dust box each hour that passed. The bottle number 10 was placed 10 hours ago, the bottle 9 hours ago, and so on. After placing the last bottle, number 1, and waiting for 1 hour, Liam removed all from the box and served a glass from each bottle to his friends. Jody starts with bottle 1, but before giving her verdict, she quickly sips from each glass in succession, a smile on her face. Similarly, Liam is somewhat anxious to know the result, but also admires his friend indulging in the wine that way, as one of his dreams in his previous life was to be able to drink like that. Thinking the boy is eyeing the girl wickedly, Asuna smacks him on the back without mercy. He explains that he was just admiring Jody's beautiful attitude, but the woman doesn't want to hear excuses and demands that he not look at any girl with that lecherous face. Either way, Jody assesses that the wine one tastes like it's aged for 1 year and number 10 for 10 years. Thus, Liam concludes that 1 year inside the dust box passes in 1 hour. After this test, the group heads to the Promised Land, where the newest village that Liam is leading alongside the companions he gathered along the way is being built. Jody and Asuna mingle with the others and are enchanted by the beauty and liveliness of that place. At night, to welcome the guests in style, Rana announces that a great banquet has been prepared. As always, Chris challenges Guy, this time to see who cooks better. To start humiliating, the she-wolf showcases the special dish of her race, monster sheep barbecue. Jody and Asuna drool over this culinary masterpiece, but Guy promises to turn the tables with his secret trump card, an extremely tasty monster cow roast from his people. Again, Asuna and Jody eye the meal from afar while the two challengers praise each other's performance. For her part, Rana arrives with the elf special, herb and mushroom soup, which can also be enhanced with Liam's instant noodles. After the challenge, Asuna can no longer wait and attacks the 3 dishes displayed before her. Jody, embarrassed, warns the girl that she's being rude. However, not much different from that, the others also freely enjoy the prepared dishes, and everyone interacts with each other while enjoying the tasty and well-served meal. The next day, the villagers take the opportunity to harvest the abundant fruits that infested the region's trees, where Liam picks to share to make a variety of juices. Asuna comments that she's never seen such star-shaped fruit, and Jody can't wait to try one. Suddenly, Chris and Guy appear, running after grabbing a bunch of them, competing to see who had gathered more. At that moment, Rana scolds them, explaining that if they take all the fruits from one tree, it won't bear fruit again. Amidst this, the group hears screams of pain coming from somewhere in the forest, prompting them to rush towards the source. Upon arriving, Liam sees a creature biting Gon, prompting him to summon 17 power missiles to contain the threat. The monster is thrown away but withstands the damage and dashes deeper into the forest. To identify the creature, Liam chases after it but loses track and gives up the pursuit. Meanwhile, Guy checks on his friend only to find Gon exhibiting a mutant reaction, assuming a monstrous expression similar to the creature that bit him, as if undergoing zombification. When attacked by his comrade, Guy is confused and tries to convince the transformed troll that they are old friends, but failing that, he attempts to restrain Gon in some way. Liam intervenes with a total purification spell, healing Gon's neck wound and putting him to sleep instantly. Given the symptoms, Jody suspects this to be a case of vampire infection. Normally, there's nothing to be done once someone's infected, but this time Liam manages to heal Gon, leading the familiar to recognize how incredible her master is. However, Guy and Chris believe it wasn't a vampire, as they would turn to dust in sunlight. Insisting on her hypothesis, Jody considers the possibility of a mutant Dracula, a rare vampire born once in centuries, under whose rule lesser vampires become stronger and immune to sunlight. Facing this potential threat, Liam orders everyone to gather information. Hours later, a werewolf returns to the village in haste, reporting that a horde of 10,000 vampires was spotted 10 kilometers to the north. As this is 100 times the number of village soldiers, everyone is extremely worried. Moreover, since there are thousands of vampires, it's clear that other inhabitants of the land have been taken by them. Adding to this, the scouts saw orcs and goblins among the horde. With this information, Jody is now certain if Dracula is leading these evil forces. Rena points out that vampires are usually a quiet species that lives away from others. Chris is outraged that innocent beings have turned violent due to the Dracula, and Guy adds that they need to defeat this enemy before the situation worsens. However, given the horde's overwhelming superiority, as Liam well remembers, they must do what they can at the moment. First of all, he orders the evacuation of the neighboring villages. After the villagers do their part concerning the evacuation order, one of them returns to the village and reports that the others didn't listen to them, convinced they would never lose to such weak creatures as vampires. In the orc village, they fought bravely for their territory but were crushed by the overwhelming numbers of vampires. Moreover, a vampire clearly different from the others appeared, and all the lesser ones knelt before him. At that moment, this superior being made the defeated vampires regenerate. Obviously, Liam deduces this to be the Dracula, and everyone worries about the horde being invincible while the leader is alive. However, based on the information he received, he has an idea of how to fight the vampires. Thus, as night falls, a group of 5 peasants stands at the forefront of the endless horde of monsters. As the monsters approach, the team activates their new magic armor and dons the special equipment. Following this, Rana casts Waterfall, a water magic spell that wreaks havoc on the battlefield. Then Chris launches Explosion, followed by Guy's Gaia Impact. In turn, Masuna strikes with the Blade of Wrath and Jody with the Arrow of Judgment. Watching the battle from atop a cliff, Liam Hamilton pays close attention to his surroundings. After a barrage of attacks, the village team manages to defeat part of the monsters, then runs to the next challenge. However, Dracula decides to show up at the venue and prevents them from leaving. When the leader appears, his subordinates kneel, then Liam fearlessly teleports in front of the most powerful enemy and transports him 100 kilometers away using the same displacement spell. Dracula asks what kind of joke this is, and the human explains that he separated him from his subordinates by 100 kilometers. Now all that's left is to defeat the vampire master to resolve everything. However, clearly the vampire has another idea in mind, and as long as he hasn't drained all the inferior races, he will never rest. With that, Liam launches 19 power missiles at the enemy, who easily blocks the attack, moves stealthily behind the human and tries to strike him, but without success. After escaping, Liam wonders how the vampire ended up behind him. Regardless, he now hurls 9 holy spears at Dracula, who even when hit, simply evaporates and reconstitutes elsewhere. The monster's movement speed is so fast that it manages to grab Liam from behind. The boy reacts with the illusion spell and suffers a bite on the neck. Soon, the original Liam detaches from the clone and orders the copy to dissolve. Faced with the situation, the vampire admits that the human has mastered many spells, while Liam, already exhausted, reflects that he still has one last ace up his sleeve. If he uses his Guardian Raiden's armor, his attack power will increase, but it will consume his mana quickly. Hence, this will be his final resort, which the mage cannot use until he is sure he can win. Thus, when casting a fireball, Liam watches Dracula perform the same trick to escape. Later, when freezing the opponent with ice needles, the same thing happens again, and even though he was surrounded by a layer of ice, the vampire managed to shift his body to the outside as if nothing held him. Having done that, the creature claims that all the human mage's efforts will be in vain, for he is invincible and his existence defies the logic of this world. Since he does not have a life, he also does not have a death. His body is merely a vessel to absorb the life that floats through the air. Hearing that Dracula is not alive, Liam starts to think of ideas, but Dracula advances and threatens to bite the human. Quickly, Liam reacts by trapping the opponent in the dust box, for just like the item box, it's impossible to store living things inside. Since the vampire is not alive, it's checkmate. Now the question is to see how long this monster can survive inside this box, which contains no life within. 10 hours later, which translated to 10 years inside the dust box, Dracula enters a state of suspended animation, perhaps unable to do anything against his prison. With that, Liam believes he has won the duel. Raiden laughs at the boy's very eccentric way of handling the fight, and Liam remarks that sometimes it's better to use your head than 1,000 fireballs. After defeating the enemy leader, the young Baron returns to his family and asks what happened to Dracula's subordinates. They tell him that they started getting dazed recently, but don't know why. Asuna approaches a monster and easily breaks its tooth. Joby mentions that some had lost their teeth naturally, so they needed to be sure if Liam had defeated the master vampire. Either way, it seems these monsters escaped Dracula's control and even look better for it. So Liam puts this matter aside for now and focuses on other issues he needs to resolve. In the midst of this, the newly freed creatures are violently engulfed by what Raiden explains as Dracula's mana. According to the dragon, their bodies were being controlled by this mana, but now that the source has vanished, they will all disappear if things continue as they are. Trying to prevent this, Liam remembers that he cured Gon with a clean sweep spell, a sacred device that heals all ailments. When he uses it on the first monster, it is freed from the mana burning its body. Thus, the boy repeats the same magic for each creature affected by a powerful blue fire. However, before he realizes it, all the monsters revert to their previous state of suffering, leaving Liam terrified. Raiden asks the human to calm down and remember their recent conversation. Sometimes it's better to use one area spell than hundreds of fireballs. With this in mind, Liam summons Guardian Raiden and dons his magical armor to perform a general clean sweep by turning it into an area spell. Finally, the Baron uses this tactic and removes Dracula's mana from each monster again. Thrilled to be freed, the humans and demi-humans who were cursed are no longer monsters and revert to their original form. In turn, Liam can't help but faint. Sometime later, he wakes up still at night and asks how long he was out. Asuna thinks it was about an hour, so the boy asks what happened to the others who suffered from Dracula's mana. The family members point to the saved beings and show that they are still happy. Setting that aside, they question what happened to Liam, since he was overflowing with light and even regenerated those who were about to disappear. At that moment, Chris comes running in desperation to see how the master is, and he explains that he just used more mana than he should have. As Reyna came along, Liam asked them to gather the vampires, but not those who were transformed, but those who always were. The officers comply with the order and gather the vampires for the Baron, and he is shocked to see that among the 10,000 ready for the attack, only a handful of stragglers remain. One of the vampires steps forward and asks the human Baron to spare the others by taking responsibility for everything, but Liam makes it clear that he has no intention of killing anyone. After all, they were being controlled by Dracula. In fact, the boy wants the vampires to be able to walk during the day so they can move to the village he is building as the way they are now. Once they lost Dracula's powers, they would be easily destroyed by the sun. Now, if they decide to join the village, it must follow 2 rules. First, listen to everything Liam Hamilton says. Second, do not cause internal strife. Other than that, Liam will not force the vampires to do anything. Surprised and delighted by such simple conditions, the vampires accept the invitation and join the new civilization born in the cradle of the Promised Land. Thus, Liam prepares to apply the familiar pact, but with some improvements. Just as he created the magical armor with some adjustments, the wizard decided to make improvements to this spell as well, evolving it a contract spell, High Familiar, making it so the vampires' bodies don't disappear with sunlight. From now on, the leader of the vampires will be called Alucard and will go from a normal vampire to a noble vampire who resists the sun. After recruiting his new companions 4 days after the battle, Liam returns to the Master of Vampires and notices that after 100 hours, the monster had completely disappeared. Meanwhile, in his mansion, Marquis Leonardo Berkeley learns that Dracula was defeated by a single human, but doesn't think this is concerning. On the other hand, the man who accompanies this view in a crystal ball is terrified, saying that the plan to use this confusion as an excuse to send troops has gone down the drain, but Leonardo wants the man to forget Dracula and focus on who defeated him, Liam Hamilton. The images did not record the exact way the Baron defeated the monster, but still, the Marquis knows that this boy is a monster in human skin because he is capable of conjuring 19 spells at once and possesses the power of a dragon. Either way, the noble demands that his subordinate continue investigating this young mage deeply. As for that land, they will conquer it later. After the servant's departure, Leonardo thinks alone that at the critical hour of an era, an eccentric being always appears. In this case, he doesn't know if Liam Hamilton is a hero or a demonic king. Speaking of him, the next day Liam is just wiped out, lying on the grass of the village to try and rest a bit. After all, he signed a contract with 10,000 monsters now living in the Promised Land. Now you can imagine the effort that took to invent a name for each of them. At this, Slalin and Slip-On, 2 slimes he contracted as familiars, show him a doll of the master that they themselves produced. Looking around, the Baron is proud of the work the inhabitants have been doing in the shadows, erecting structure after structure to make this village a worthy place to live. In a short time, it might even evolve into a city. The various elves are leading the constructions after improving this skill, and nothing is more fair than choosing Reyna as the organizer. Meanwhile, Guy and the other giants are in charge of protecting the Promised Land. The werewolves, being good hunters, secure the food. Each race has a specific role in this society based on their greatest qualities, and so far, everything has been going right. So Guy warns that humans are approaching the village. Claiming to be merchants from Quistador, they request an audience with the king of this nation. Despite this, Liam insists he is not the king, which confuses Guy since Liam clearly appears to be the master of all the inhabitants of this place. To prove his point, the giant turns to the villagers and asks if anyone disagrees that Liam Raiden is the king. Immediately, everyone shows the same enthusiasm in confirming their desire to have Liam as their absolute leader. In light of this, Raiden himself mysteriously appears in the air and declares the young human as the absolute leader of this land, leaving the boy puzzled with this sudden responsibility. A few hours later, Liam visits Scarlet, who was waiting for him. She reveals that she has been investigating the internal situation of the Gemmill Kingdom during these days but hasn't uncovered anything. Nonetheless, she asserts with conviction that the king and ministers are hiding something, and they won't give up that land easily. The problem is that the princess couldn't find out why. Liam asks if Raiden has any idea, but as the dragon doesn't respond, the boy guesses it has something to do with the humans. Scarlet adds that it might be something so insignificant that the dragon god doesn't even care, but Liam thinks knowing that the Gemmill Kingdom won't easily relinquish the land is enough. Speaking of which, he asks if she will accompany him. But she plans to continue her investigation for a while longer. Thus, Liam leaves after promising to return to see the princess, who blushes at his declaration. When he returns to the village, Liam again asks Raiden if he knows anything, because as the dragon god does not lie, he must have remained silent for a good reason. Soon after realizing that this boy no longer has the mindset of a mere 12-year-old, the dragon questions if he understands what it means to be a guardian, like Guardian Raiden. Liam thinks it has to do with being a protector, but he's not sure exactly what he's protecting. At that moment, Raiden teleports the boy to a chamber with strange words on the walls and asks him to fill the space with mana, since he has significantly leveled up after his last fight and should now have enough mana. The human follows the request, and to his surprise, a secret passage opens in the floor leading underground. Liam descends the stairs and, upon reaching the destination, feels a sensation similar to when he discovered the Magicopedia, so he suspects it's another artifact of ancient memories. Raiden is impressed by the young man's intelligence and confirms that the writings on the wall are indeed ancient memories. In fact, this place as a whole is like an artifact itself. Liam asks if that means there are spells there, and the dragon explains that crows have the habit of taking shiny things to their nests. Dragons do something similar. For instance, Liam is standing in a dragon's nest, a place where ancient and forbidden spells have been gathered. For example, the spell Liam is seeing on the wall is the first of them. As the boy increases his mana, new seals will be broken and he will have access to other spells. Moreover, young Hamilton is the first human in centuries to break this seal. Excited, Liam captures the spell from the wall and notes that the process is similar to that of a grimoire or the Magicopedia. Having done that, he wants to quickly test his new power and conjures 19 spells at once, but the magics appear only as bubbles and simply vanish. Raiden explains that the human's mana is being cancelled, but before he can continue explaining why, Liam tries new spells, all unsuccessfully. Then he assumes that this mana cancellation prevents anyone from trying to use the old spell in this place. When the dragon confirms that's exactly it, the mage performs the activation, surrounding himself with new bubbles and runs outside. Yet again, his spells are cancelled. With that, he returns to the dragon's nest to activate the old spell with the stone he picked up outside. However, when he throws the stone at a bubble, nothing happens. Next, he hits the same bubble with a magic missile, splitting the bubble into two. At this point, Liam concludes that physical attacks are ineffective and spells are absorbed, only multiplying these things. Raiden tells him that the test is to solve the riddle and master the spell, giving the clue that the bubbles multiply. According to the dragon, the wizard won't have problems since he can activate magics simultaneously, so there should be one line to activate the old spell and the others to disrupt the bubbles with attacks. Although it's a slow method, it's effective. However, Liam thinks there's a better way and uses the contract invocation. Liam bringing his clone to help with the strategy. Having done that, he announces he'll use one activation line in the contract invocation and the other 18 to practice the old spell. Thus, he conjures the bubbles again and begins the activation, while the clone uses power missiles to hit the bubbles. Raiden realizes that indeed this tactic seems faster, while Liam intends to hold out for an hour until the activation. An hour later, the strategy works and the Baron manages to master the old spell, impressing even Raiden given the short time required. After that, Hamilton leaves the nest and summons his item box to drop a huge rock on his clone. The copy responds with the old spell, Shield of Absolute Strength, which is completely destroyed along with the rock. In other words, before breaking, this barrier completely repels a single physical attack, no matter what it is. However, if there are two small stones, for instance, the shield will only block the first, and it does not repel spells. With this in mind, several clones throw stones at Liam, who conjures the Shield of Absolute Strength in continued activation, several barriers at once surrounding the user, each absorbing a different stone. Now the problem the mage identified is in a situation of war, like if thousands of arrows are shot at once. Moreover, as soon as attacks are too fast to be defended in this way, it seems. Regardless, the wizard imagines he can handle it as he gains more mana. At last, Raiden announced that the Absolute Magic Shield was sealed on the next floor, so Liam needed to level up if he wanted to access that area. However, considering how this shield works and recalling that it was the dragon god himself who crafted that artifact, Liam believed he could break the seal right then by substituting physical strength with magic. With this in mind, the mage envisioned using every possible spell line to activate just one and planned to test it repeatedly in his imagination until he fixed any flaws, because as Raiden had said, it required manipulating causality. After calculating each step in his mind, the mage finally awakened the Absolute Magic Shield, compelling the dragon god to tip his hat to the boy, for he had managed to learn such a challenging ancient spell in such a straightforward way. Pleased with his discovery, Liam conjured 19 power missiles and continuously activated the Absolute Magic Shield to confirm everything had gone smoothly. As the boy practiced, Raiden reflected on how no human had undone the seals of those ruins in centuries, but Liam Hamilton had not only done that, but also activated an ancient spell in his own unique way. Later, standing beside Shade, the shadow spirit, Liam was acting curiously, prompting Raiden to ask what he was doing. The young mage replied that he was training his nose to become accustomed to sensing mana presence. Raiden imagined this would enable him to use both types of barriers, physical and magical, correctly, and the mage confirmed, though Raiden wondered if it wouldn't be better to always use both. Liam explained that while it wasn't impossible, he wanted to find a more effective way to use them that would use less mana. The dragon thought this feasible if Liam could anticipate an opponent's attack in a second. Regardless, the dragon god praised Hamilton's endless desire to evolve when it came to magic. The next day, Asuna rushes to Liam to warn him that Guy wants to speak with him at point 17. As the city grew, the inhabitants created several meeting points to aid communication and efficiency. Upon arriving via teleportation, the nobleman sees the guardians of the Promised Land facing armed humans. According to the leader of the Gigas, these men claim to be messengers from the Duchy of Palta, demanding an audience with Liam Hamilton. Still unaccustomed to being treated as king of this place, the young noble asks where the leader of the men is, and Guy points to the man next to the carriage. Without delay, a man named X-Blast introduces himself on behalf of the Archduke, requesting that young Hamilton marry Lady Flora. He also asks if Liam has already married Princess Scarlet of Jamil. When the boy replies that he will marry only later, X states that the Archduke would never be so rude as to make him wait like this. With that, he signals for Lady Flora to step down from the carriage, making it clear that Hamilton could take her hand at this very moment if he so wishes. Embarrassed, Liam wonders if this is how nobles marry. Without responding to the proposal, the young man invites the travelers to take a walk in the city and talk more calmly. X-Blast takes this invitation as a yes to the marriage proposal and claims his master will be very pleased with the news, but Liam clarifies that this is not the case. Suddenly, the boy senses danger around him and activates the absolute magical shield, which protects him from a massive layer of fire speeding towards him, with its bizarre humanized face, until it explodes in the area. Although the barrier partially works, the impact is strong enough to knock down the Duchy of Palta's convoy, including Flora. Seeing her condition, Liam wonders what could have happened, and Raiden explains that it's the killer element, an explosive monster created by humans. Had Liam's reaction been slower, Lady Flora would have turned to ashes in the blink of an eye. Liam asks who would do such a thing, and the dragon laughs and suggests that it might be someone who isn't present at the moment. Looking around, the boy notices that X-Blast has disappeared, and Raiden concludes that this man might have been responsible for the disaster, as nobles tend to act strangely. Thus, Liam asks Guy to protect the visitors, especially Flora, while he himself goes to solve a problem. Without delay, the noble teleports to Jamil in search of Scarlet. A maid at the princess's mansion informs him that her lady is taking a bath, so the young man decides to wait for her to come out. Afterwards, he takes Scarlet to the site of the incident in the Promised Land and explains who Lady Flora is and that X-Blast wanted him to marry this woman. Scarlet reveals she has never heard of a noblewoman by this name but knows who Blast is. He is the right-hand man of the Duchy of Palta and is known to operate behind the scenes when it suits him. Liam adds that as soon as he agreed to speak with Flora, a monster called Killer Element exploded near her. Scarlet thinks Blast is using this to blame the territory for the monsters, so he could accuse Liam's kingdom of having killed the maiden as an excuse to invade the Promised Land. That said, the princess takes a closer look at Flora and recognizes a mole beside her breast. Indeed, this woman is an illegitimate and unrecognized daughter of the Archduke, as the characteristics of the noble's bastard children are always disclosed in case something important happens. In the meantime, Flora finally wakes up thinking she's in paradise. Liam asks the girl not to die before her time, otherwise there would be no reason to have saved her. Scarlet informs her that a monster exploded and caused a tragedy, so Flora panics and tells them to stay away, as this matter is extremely dangerous. Unconcerned, Liam says he can block as many explosions as needed, but that's not what the woman is talking about. Soon, showing her arm imbued with magic, Flora reveals she has been cursed, and even if the explosion didn't kill her, this curse will, and she doesn't want to involve the person who saved her in this. However, instead of stepping back, Liam takes the girl's arm and uses his Cleanse All magic, which instantly erases the curse. After that, he asks if he can help with anything else, while the cured girl tries to understand how this kit made the procedure seem so simple. She had been told it would be impossible to reverse this ailment, but Scarlet tells her that her master is a user of holy magic. Moreover, Hamilton wants to know what kind of curse it was, and Flora heard it's the kind that turns humans into monsters who become servants of the person responsible for the spell. Upon hearing this, Raiden discovers that the responsible used Carnage liquid. Seeing that the kid is talking to himself, Flora asks what's going on, then Scarlet explains that Liam communicates internally with the dragon god. Raiden finishes the explanation by saying that this liquid is a cursed item and asks if it reminds Liam of anything. The boy thinks about how the item makes monsters obey commands, and it reminds him of Dracula. With this in mind, Liam commits to protecting Flora so that the Duchy of Palta will never again threaten her life. After this meeting, Scarlet calls Hamilton to the side to say that he is underestimating not only the Duchy of Palta but also the other two neighboring nations, Jamil and Quistador. In the princess's opinion, it is now necessary to exalt Liam Hamilton's strength. The kid asks what that's all about, then Raiden explains that he needs to demonstrate his own power and that of his nation. Liam asks if he will have to start a fight with someone, but the princess explains that's not the case. In fact, first and foremost, he should create a currency. As the young leader continues to be clueless, the woman lays out the magical armor he made for her recently. According to Scarlet, each scale of this armor was crafted most elaborately, and seeing this level of craftsmanship, she was certain that Liam should create a currency. To illustrate her point, she places 3 types of silver coins on the table. The boy notices that one has a well-defined stamp, while the others are more blurred. Taking this as a starting point, his companion explains that the coin with a clear stamp is an official silver coin from Jamil. A mold was taken from this coin, making it the basis for mass production and distribution across numerous regions. However, the more it is reproduced, the more the image blurs, as seen with the other coins. Because of this, the quality of the silver and the clarity of the imprint are evidence of a nation's technological level and a symbol of its power. If Liam could reproduce coins as perfect as the original, he could demonstrate strength without the need for warfare. Liking the idea, the boy summons Ifrit and Gnome, familiars who could handle the job. After an intense development journey, the king finally achieves a satisfactory result. Scarlet picks up one of the newly minted coins and praises the quality of the technique as a clear demonstration of good technology. Now the next step is to develop copper coins. However, if Liam uses pure copper, it will be more valuable melted down as a coin. But the princess has a solution to this problem. They will make copper coins using bronze by mixing copper with low-value tin. For instance, in Jamil, about 65% copper is used because using less would make the coins too hard. 65% is a good ratio for balancing the clarity of the imprint and the value of the coin. With this knowledge, Liam Hamilton again summons Gnome and Ifrit to undertake this task. However, something unexpected happens and Scarlet is impressed. The coin was developed with just 50% copper but maintained the quality of the stamp, giving it a more silvery hue than she had ever seen. A few hours later, the king's closest servants go to a bank to learn the exchange rate of the new coin in the Promised Land, that is, its value relative to other coins currently in circulation. The banker is so impressed with the quality of the silver and the stamp that he deems this coin superior even to Jamil's. And then the familiars show the copper coin, which also leaves the man astonished at its purity of just 50% copper for the quality of the stamp. Thus, he believes that the coins of the Promised Land are worth 3 times more than those of Jamil. Despite the good news back in Liam's kingdom, while his familiars produce new coins, he receives a letter and realizes that his territory is still seen as a threat filled with monsters. Scarlet notices the king is downcast and asks what happened, so he shows her the letter. It was a direct message from abridged Hamilton, Liam's older brother, demanding a deal between the two. Upon reading those words, Scarlet tears up the letter, making it clear that Liam doesn't need to bow to abridged, who must be looking for an easy deal to cover up his last blunder after being beaten by Raiden. If he were the family leader, it would be understandable for Liam to listen, but not to this nobody who thinks he's something. Speaking of the boy's family, one of his brothers visits his kingdom, but not the eldest. Instead, it's his great partner Bruno, who is shocked by the level of development the city has achieved. Thinking it would be inappropriate for the king to use his own house, Scarlet offers the residence built for her so the king can meet for a talk with his brother, and that's where the 3 go. On the way, Bruno whispers to Liam that this blonde is something else. Upon arriving at the princess's residence, somewhat clumsily, Bruno asks permission for his family to trade with Liam's nation, provided they obey the laws and pay the appropriate taxes, of course. Liam asks for patience at this time and tells his brother to explain the story from the beginning. Then Bruno recalls that this land is surrounded by 3 countries, Jamil, Palta, and Quistador. Under Liam's rule, Bruno is certain that the Promised Land will prosper to the point of becoming a fundamental trade route, and it would be important for his family to have such a significant contact. Hearing this, Liam considers that abridged is so arrogant he isn't even the family leader but sent that letter as if he were. On the other hand, Bruno, being the head of a low nobility family, came in person and was extremely humble with his younger brother. Thus, Liam allows his brother to do business with his territory. After all, Bruno is not just a great friend, but has been his first ally ever since his stay at the Hamilton residence. Finally, Liam communicates telepathically with Scarlet and asks for advice on this matter, and the princess tells him 2 things. First, he should be welcoming to Bruno, both personally and in terms of the taxes he must pay to trade with the Promised Land. Second, do everything she said about Bruno the opposite way with abridged and the Hamilton family. In short, be friendly with allies and cold with those who underestimate you. If necessary, crush them with your power, for that is part of being a king. Later, with Bruno's departure, Scarlet emphasizes that although he was older than Liam, he acted all the while with humility and sincerity, besides showing great competence. For his part, Raiden concludes that position creates the person. Bruno went from being the fourth son of a noble to the head of a low nobility family, poor, and this sense of responsibility caused the young man to change his behavior. The same cannot be said for Albrevet, who will inherit the position of chief simply because he is the eldest. In fact, that's why the dragon god suggested to the first king of Jamel that nobles lose their titles after 3 generations. Seeing Liam's astonished reaction, she asks what he was thinking. When Liam tells her that the dragon invented this policy, the princess is even more enchanted with Raiden's wisdom, as it is thanks to this law that nobles always need to achieve new things if they want to maintain a higher social position. By the way, Raiden praises Liam for having asked Scarlet's opinion before finalizing deals with his brother. He points out that even if one is the absolute ruler of a nation, when unsure about something, it's wise to seek advice from the most trusted vassals, as it could lead to the most advantageous decision. And speaking of which, the dragon god thinks Scarlet was very wise to suggest using a coin to demonstrate the nation's strength, though such a measure only works with other equally wise individuals. Liam doesn't grasp what that means, so Raiden uses the example of the young man's own older brother. What if Albrevet were the leader of another nation? If that were the case, surely Liam would be attacked by him and other foolish kings who try to impose their will through violence. In light of this, Liam knows he must fight back, but his current style isn't enough to protect his territory as well as he'd like, especially since magic users are vulnerable while casting spells. After all, even though he has learned to use more than one spell at a time, the boy loses a lot of mana doing so. Nevertheless, Raiden emphasizes that the human still has much to evolve, especially considering that magic has another flaw: it can be sealed. To compensate for this problem, Liam needs to constantly strengthen himself by using his own mana to gain strength without turning it into magic. Having said that, the dragon god finally decides to reveal himself personally to the young human and shows that his original form is that of a 13-year-old girl. To Liam's surprise, he demonstrates how to use mana without spells by accumulating energy around the body to strengthen oneself. Following the example, Liam manages to jump high but loses control and falls hard to the ground. Since that's the case, Raiden teaches the lad how it's done. In this learning, Liam must pretend he is like a child who plays by spending all of his energy until he falls from exhaustion. Having said that, she summons those bubbles from the dragon's nest for Liam to learn to control his mana expenditure by transferring magical energy to the 5 bubbles. When the boy does this, she tells him to think of it as the total amount of his mana. Now Liam must adjust each bubble to 20% of the amount in 10 seconds. In his attempt, Liam lets the bubbles burst, and Raiden explains that just now the total went from 100% to 110%. She then conjures another bubble on his forehead, and the boy needs to lower the total by 20%, but ends up being too slow and lets it burst again. Some time later, he finally masters the technique. The next step is to transfer 25% of the mana to the left hand and right foot and 15% to the right hand and left foot. Honestly, Raiden thought the kid would quickly give up on this tedious theoretical training, but he kept excited until he evolved to the point of launching several power missiles at once. Perhaps in the end, Liam Hamilton might be a magic genius.
As the days passed, Liam continued practicing mana distribution following Raiden's instructions. At one point, the dragon revealed that the human could now manipulate his mana at will, making it a good time to move forward. Frustrated by the seemingly endless lessons, Liam questioned what was yet to come, as Raiden requested a moment to enter an energy orb located in the boy's chest and then quickly exited. "What on earth was that?" Liam asked, but the girl explained that he would understand on his own after completing the next task. Then, she tossed a rope of light to the apprentice and asked him to play tug-of-war with her, trying to pull the rope using his right hand at 0. Liam tried but failed, prompting Raiden to clarify that the challenge was not about physical strength but mana. With that, she instructed the boy to use his mana at level 10 instead of 0, which finally moved the rope. Gradually, she announced plans to alter the mana distribution slowly, asking Liam to adjust his accordingly. This exercise would help the boy understand his magic through the magic of others. Suddenly, Raiden pulled the rope, knocking Liam down with an energy discharge. He began to grasp what the dragon god meant and focused entirely on mastering the exercise. Feeling Raiden's mana potency, Liam matched it as it increased from 20 to 30, and then from 30 to 99. Amidst this, Raiden's mana vanished from the rope, now appearing to come through the air, seemingly about to disappear in seconds if Liam did not focus on this magical energy. Radon remarked that Liam was progressing faster than she had anticipated and that he was about to realize something significant soon. Anxious about this impending lesson, Liam focused on his mana and noticed it matched Radon's, something he had never imagined possible, having always believed the dragon god possessed an infinite reservoir of magical energy, far surpassing his own. Radon explained that she had left some of her extra power inside him earlier, and that his body now held the same percentage of mana as Liam. Understanding why he would comprehend this exercise on his own, Liam heard the dragon confess she thought it would take him longer. Radon then gathered the rope to begin the final test. At this moment, Liam was to cast as many spells as he could. He launched 19 power missiles, but to his surprise, 29 shot out. Confused, as he hadn't felt his mana shifting, the teacher explained that by amplifying his limbs and perception, he had learned to use mana more efficiently and had advanced his use of multiple spells by 2 levels at once. After all, according to the teacher, cunning counts more than strength, but that's just the first part of the saying. The final part is, strength breaks cunning. To this day, humans prefer the first part of the saying, neglecting the second. Taking advantage of the topic, Radon highlighted that in terms of power alone, humans are weak in this land, which is why they favor cunning over strength, as if it were an unconscious desire to compensate for their weakness by defeating stronger abilities using methods other than brute force, since that's what remains for them. Until now, Liam had relied on his strength to evolve his powers, with Radon's assistance, so the correct saying should be combine strength and cunning, as there isn't just one path between power and skill. Both are correct and should be considered simultaneously. After this lesson, Liam returned to his city, which had grown even larger, to the extent that the king had to participate in periodic work report meetings to prevent problems. At one of these meetings, Rihanna reported that operations in the northern quadrant were almost complete, so she would increase the workforce in the east, besides the leftovers from Liam's palace had begun. Aside from that, it was important to address the report on water and salt, and people really didn't understand where Liam got such large quantities of these resources. He explained that he went to the sea to collect salt water to produce both using the item box and illusion. But Asuna thought that, eventually, this type of service should no longer be performed by the king personally. Jody agreed, as it would be interesting if the population could provide these resources themselves, since it was strange for the king to be involved in every job within his domains. Thus, Liam thought it a good idea to find a way to extract water and salt using magic, until Scarlet stood up to inquire about a salt lake or a salt mine to be excavated in the Promised Land. The dragon believed there was one southwest of the city, as there was always wild cattle and sheep there. When Liam relayed the dragon's message, the princess agreed it was quite possible, noting that cattle and sheep like to lick salt stones. She asked about the location of this lake, and Radon promised to inform Liam of the details later. After the meeting, Asuna commented that it would be great if there was an ocean nearby, as Liam had once said he could arrange seawater with magic. But if there was a sea, this problem would be easily solved. Liam liked the idea, while Scarlet explained that it was thanks to the power of the dragon god that there was no ocean there because, according to legend, there was an ocean in the region. But during the War of the Three Dragons, the dragon god had dropped a continent in the current area of Palta, creating the land as it is today. Either way, it's a fact that an ocean would solve many of the region's problems. With that in mind, Liam heads to Radon in his human form to discuss this matter. The dragon asks if the mage can't create a spell, but he explains that he has indeed concocted one. It's a large-scale terrain modification spell, something he doesn't have enough mana to cast. Since he wanted to create an ocean, he hoped the dragon might lend his power. But Radon makes it clear he's not willing to do that, and that the human should just create an ocean within the scale he can manage at the moment. Hours later, the noble Liam takes Asuna and Scarlet to see what he has managed to develop for the Promised Land. It may not be a sea, but it's like a giant pool that serves as a water source for the city. Asuna drinks the water and finds that it really does taste like the sea because of the salt. She's curious about the kind of magic the master used, but he reveals that he actually brought this from the real sea, while the gnome altered the terrain to hold water, and Liam transformed the surroundings into this beach. Asuna asks if this water might someday run out, but Scarlet replies with some impatience that the master would never make such a mistake. and he surely devised some way to prevent that from happening. Embarrassed, Liam points out that he used the item box so that this place is always connected to the sea, which greatly excites Asuna since the water will replenish itself, no matter how much they use the resource. In light of the master's success and intelligence, Asuna thinks it would be good to celebrate the city's water by taking a bath on this beach. Scarlet asks what the girl plans to do with the sacred ocean created by the master. Then her friend whispers something in the woman's ear. After that, the princess herself asks for permission to swim there, and when permission is granted, Asuna runs with her characteristic speed to invite the city's women for a communal bath. Embarrassed, Liam tries to mingle with the people, although the women in bikinis are slightly distracting his focus. For some reason, they were all concerned about what the master would think of the outfits they were wearing for the bath, and it was up to the boy to comment on each of the costumes they presented. Eventually, Chris appears running and knocks the boy down as if she were a rambunctious puppy, adding even more movement to what was already a peculiar scene. By the way, wherever he went and wherever he looked, Liam saw maidens wearing swimwear here and there. At a certain point, Asuna pulls Liam to enter the water after the endless parade of beauties from the promised land, with even a volleyball net set up later for people to play comfortably. Although Liam is appealing with his skills well above average, which isn't exactly a fair competition. Out of the game, all the women were enjoying themselves in their own way, and Asuna was the person who most insisted on having Liam by her side. She even invites the king to race to the other coast, with the condition that the loser does whatever the winner commands. Before the boy could agree, Asuna and Chris had already jumped into the sea to cross the coast and win the contest, so Liam starts a bit behind, but either way, the race begins. After the race, he stops to rest in the shade somewhere on the beach, where a girl was lying down. He jokes that all the women were so worried if their bikinis matched, and that he shouldn't have to be forced to see that. However, the girl asks if he wasn't happy to see all that, leaving Liam speechless, albeit with blushing cheeks. Then, the king returns to the city and sees Scarlet saying goodbye to a man on horseback at the entrance gate. He approaches to find out what's going on and learns that the region of Agi, from Jamil, is her mother's homeland and, unfortunately, is experiencing a water shortage. Since that's the case, the noble decides to help this region by producing as much water as needed with the help of Celsius, remembering that they could transport this resource at will with the item box and teleport. Scarlet is confused by the leader's willingness to help another territory, so he explains that it's important to get along with a neighboring nation. Thus, seeming strangely disturbed by something, Scarlet says she will notify the local king about the help. Then Liam appoints her as the messenger responsible for announcing that all necessary water will be provided without Agi having to give anything in return, since it was due to a natural disaster. After the departure of the Princess of Jamil, Radon comments that the boy is quite generous, and he responds that he's trying to follow the teaching about combining strength with cunning. Speaking of which, he remembers that he created a coin at Scarlet's suggestion to demonstrate the capabilities of the Promised Land, and that they might be useful for cooperating with the countries around them. Pleased with the young man's attitudes, Radon emphasizes that Liam has the qualities of a wise king. Then, Liam uses Celsius to begin distributing water, until he feels something like a fluctuation in the feelings of the dragon god, as if he knew he wanted to say something. Then, Radon confesses that he just thought that maybe this action is pointless, but not because of the attitude itself, since even if that nation in need were an enemy, helping in the case of natural disasters is always a good decision. The problem is that humans are not good at making good decisions. In fact, the more important a person thinks they are, the more they seem to act according to the size of their ego, like Albravit, for example. Liam asks if the king of Jamil might be that kind of person, and Radon recalls something he once heard from a human. A favor too great can become a problem later. According to the dragon god, this type of thinking is the cause of the most foolish decisions. By the way, sometime later, Scarlet returns to the Promised Land with news that the king of Jamil has refused their help, claiming his nation can handle a disaster of this scale on its own. According to the princess, refugees from Jamil have been fleeing to nearby areas, and while they are sending supplies there, they can't manage to send enough water. Liam points out that the item box could solve this problem with teleportation, so Radon wonders if they could make it rain to end this ordeal, as among the spells humans call sacred are those that control the weather. However, although excited by this possibility, Liam states he does not wish to learn that spell today, as making it rain would be using brute force, whereas now is the time for cunning. With that in mind, Liam meets with his brother Bruno, a noble of Jamal, because nobles in that region customarily help in times of tragedy as a way to maintain their merit and status. The issue is that AG is undergoing a drought, but the king of Jamal has refused aid from the promised land. So Liam wants to create water and deliver it to his brother, so that he can distribute it to the needed areas. Bruno is happy to help, but since it will cost a lot of money to distribute the water, he asks for a few days' delay. The younger brother then asks for 10 silver coins from Jamal as payment, as that's the average daily wage for manual laborers, and Bruno is impressed by his brother's kindness in charging a symbolic amount for such a complex and costly operation, although he knows his personality. After the meeting, Radon warns that people are already keeping an eye on Liam, like that employee from Jamal who claimed to be there to discuss the preparations for the marriage to the princess. But in truth, they are monitoring the protagonist's every move to ensure he does not get involved with AG. After all, as the dragon had said, human pride is a tricky business. For his part, Liam regrets that he cannot teleport to AG because he has never been there before, so he thinks about summoning his clone to escape from the spies. In the meantime, Guy reports that Jamal has sent people to various regions to study the best route for their arrival at the princess's wedding. Therefore, the leader orders that the giant lets them do as they please and observes them as little as possible. Even if they don't install anything or behave suspiciously, they should be left alone. With Guy's departure, Liam thinks of a way to send his illusion to AG without anyone discovering it. Upon summoning the copy, he uses Wind Cutter to change the hairstyle of the clone, but the way it turned out, it seems it will only draw more attention, so he sends the clone back, ties his own hair, and conjures his copy again, thus realizing that it appears the same as he does at the moment of conjuration, also with tied hair. Furthermore, the copy explains that when it disappears, it's as if nothing had happened to it, meaning everything resets. Radon adds that Liam's mana is the same as the clone's, so it's better to use an enchantment. Thus, Liam manages to create an improved spell on his clone, transforming him into Amelia, the singer he adores, with a voice identical to hers and still capable of casting spells. From now on, they can send water to AG without raising suspicions. Soon, with this mission, Amelia is sent to aid AG. The following day, Liam walked through his city and noticed that trading with outsiders had made it flourish. The local currency was in circulation, and commerce with neighboring nations had begun, thanks to Bruno's proposal. Surrounded by 3 other countries, the Promised Land was fortunately becoming the region's trade center. Meanwhile, in Jamal, AG was hit by a severe drought, but they refused help, so Liam had to send Amelia. Suddenly, along the way, Liam noticed 2 men eyeing him intently. Pretending to be unaware, he continued his walk until he met Slillan and Slip-On, who called their master to play something. Liam mentioned that the 2 were quite dirty, so the slimes performed a trick that cleaned them instantly, as if by magic. Observing this, the noble looked at the ground and agreed that it was impossible for the 2 to stay clean with so much mud on the road. Thus, he came up with an idea to change the situation, maybe a shower. He then went to Guy, who was working alongside other Gigas. At one point during the construction, Guy asked the master if this was his wish, but Liam, being odd and eccentric, immediately requested that a giant rock be broken into gravel. The king then summoned his gnomes to dig a gutter along the length of the road. Radon, concerned about how the human planned to pave the road, explained that there are 3 ways to build streets, with stones, tiles, and lastly, a special soil that is heated until it melts and hardens when poured on the ground. Humans call this material burnable soil. Hearing this excited Liam, who was quite an oddball and magic fanatic, as it made him want to produce this soil using his magic. Radon, knowing the boy's obsession with magic, already guessed which option he would choose. Liam then inspected the gutters made by the gnomes, and the dragon god noticed they were 1.5 yards deep, similar only to Jamal's Avenue of Triumph, used by victorious troops in wars and leading to the king's castle. According to the ancient creature, the officials were astonished by the boy's audacity to deepen a road in such a way. Finally, after Guy and his subordinates finished fusing the burnable soil with the gravel, Liam had them pour it into the gutters until it slightly overflowed. He then summoned the salamanders to burn the mixture and start the paving process. By combining these two methods, the young man left everyone impressed. After paving the city's streets, he decided to expand the roads outside the territory. Radon noticed that the humans seemed quite serious, so he recounted an event from long ago, actually his past life, but he couldn't tell that. Once, a peddler used to visit a village, but one day he didn't show up as usual. Radon wondered if he had been attacked by wolves, but that wasn't the case. Instead, about a day and a half away from the village, the peddler's cart had gotten stuck in a hole. Fortunately, the locals were able to help, but had he been in a more isolated area, he might have had to abandon his cart or even be attacked and robbed. Therefore, city streets are crucial, but highways connecting the city to others are even more so. With this in mind, the mage ordered the gigas and salamanders to keep up the good work building more paths around the wall. By midday, Slillan and Slip-On arrived with 2 lunch boxes made by Jody for the master. Naturally, the boy reached out for the delicious-looking food, but something made him put off eating it. Feeling uneasy about something, he leaned his ear against the freshly paved road and, thanks to the 2 slimes, noticed a flaw in the pavement. That said, the regional leader had the salamanders melt 4 inches off the street's surface. With that part done, it was time for the gnomes to fix the street so that the center was higher. After completing this process, Liam poured water on the street and noticed that it drained off the road. The young man had started paving because he saw his slimes dirty, but seeing them again made him realize another issue. Where people pass, the streets become worn and accumulate water if they are straight, which further degrades their quality. After discovering this detail, Hamilton went back to training the gigas in the late afternoon and summoned them to correct all the streets they had just paved. As he was focused on this task, he forgot to create an alibi for Jamail, but the work continued at full steam the next day. While leaving the gravel paving of the streets to the crew, the mage isolated himself in the forest and tied a rope between 2 trees. Radon asked what he was planning to do, and the young man explained that he was setting up a bed. But when he lay on the rope to balance himself, he fell hard to the ground. In fact, Hamilton was training, as the training Radon gave was about distributing mana with desired concentration throughout various body parts, and during the process, the human discovered that when you let the soul flow through the body instead of using it in spells, it gives you physical strength and increases your weight. Liam had an idea with this. If he could get used to this technique and balance on the rope, he could train the mana while he slept. After all, Liam always admired the use of magic, so it didn't hurt to practice the fundamentals, even though he kept falling from the rope persistently. However, after some time of practice, it was no longer so difficult to stay on top of his improvised bed, and Radon pointed out a change that had happened in his body. Focusing on this, Liam realized that he had started to notice small differences in mana that he hadn't detected before. The dragon god explained that these were the differences in the land. For example, mana is an innate power that people possess. Differences in the land where they are born and live, in the food and water they consume, manifest as slight differences in the wavelength of their mana. Excited by his discovery, Liam Hamilton activates his mana detection and realizes that spies from the 3 neighboring nations have been in the Promised Land. Radon explains that they don't know Liam can detect them, and he shares that while power is an obstacle, it's not an invisible one. For instance, Liam Hamilton would never attack a nation with 100 million warriors. Nevertheless, the king of the Promised Land fears that Jamail, Palta, and Quistador might see him as an enemy, so he reflects on the best way to ascertain an opponent's power. Concerned, he approaches Scarlet and inquires about the number of soldiers these 3 nations can muster. She informs him that if they were to sabotage each other, Jamail and Palta could each gather about 20,000 men, while Quistador has 50,000. Liam also wonders about their strength if they do not sabotage each other, and the princess responds that if they came in full force to outdo one another, Jamail and Palta could mobilize double. Quistador always goes all out, so they do not muster more than 50,000. Liam finds the prospect of facing a combined force of 130,000 soldiers daunting, especially since the Promised Land has only about 10,000 combatants, albeit a few with magical armor. Radon points out that it might be possible to fight if everyone had such armor, but Liam recalls that he created new magical armor precisely because it wasn't feasible to do so. That is, they are easier to make, but the original armor is much stronger. In summary, the trick is to think of a way to avoid direct confrontation until then. As for foreign policy, Scarlet Jamile makes it clear that the king can count on her. Later, the king returns to his training rope and ponders that there are 3 countries bordering his, but they are not the only ones on the continent, meaning there might be spies from other places in his territory. So, he focuses his mana detection further and ends up identifying a very specific mana that catches his attention. Because of this, he rushes to a group of workers who were building roads and orders them to move away. Then, he summons gnomes to dig a deep hole. Once done, the mage jumps into the hole and finds a huge vein of high mithril at the bottom. With this amount, the sovereign will be able to equip his entire army with magical armor and compensate for the military power disparity with other nations. But that's not all. Then, Liam returns to the surface and orders Scarlet to spread the word that the Promised Land has discovered such a vast source of high mithril that it can equip its entire army with the best possible armor. With this discovery, Liam Hamilton now possesses a visible obstacle to prevent the invasion of potential enemies, so he temporarily suspends road paving to focus a good number of workers on extracting high mithril. Given the absurd amount of this mined resource, the leader celebrates that thousands of magical armors can be made, and Rihanna responds that all this is thanks to the master's great refining skill. On the other hand, there is the problem of the paving that was halted because of the mining, which the elf regrets, although she is willing to help with whatever is necessary. Taking the cue, Liam asks if some elves can use magic, and she tells him that after the familiar contract with the master, a good number of people from each species awaken magical abilities, but they lack grimoires to develop this. About this, Liam knows that grimoires are necessary to learn spells, and that it usually takes a long time to learn a single magic. His Magicopedia is like one of those grimoires, but lending it from person to person certainly isn't very efficient. Given this, Rihanna advises the king to produce grimoires on a large scale, and the boy likes the idea. He considers that the Magicopedia is an artifact of ancient memories made of high mithril that stores magical knowledge, as if it turned all the spells the user knows into grimoires. Thinking about this, he imagines that it will be possible to produce such products on a large scale, but instead of making individual rings, he thinks about doing something like in that underground altar, because the entire space of the ruins where Guardian Radon was is an artifact of ancient memories. If they can build something of that level and put everyone to train together, it would be great, but Liam realizes it would be impossible to do that. Finally, he asks if Rihanna has any magical aptitude, and she tells him she excels in ice magic. Next, he takes the elf to an inner city road and, in front of ingots of high mithril, he commands the salamanders to melt both the surface of the street and the ingots. After this, the gnomes are tasked with removing the surface and covering it with a thin layer of melted mithril. Lastly, the mage casts a spell on this precious resource and replaces the pavement removed on top of it. Having completed this process, the young man asks his companion to stand on the road to see if she feels anything different. After a few seconds standing on the street, the elf's body is taken over by a strong magical energy, and she feels spells connecting inside her. With this new source of mana, she casts an ice needle, something she had never done before. Incredulous, Rihanna questions how she was able to summon magic, and Liam explains that he transformed the high mithril in the street into an artifact of ancient memories with his magic. By placing this artifact in the city streets, instead of in a building, everyone could learn the spells. Rihanna is delighted with the master's ingenuity, but he, on the other hand, already imagines the headache it will be to pave the streets once again. Sometime later, Liam gathers some elves and werewolves to test the capacity of the artifact in the streets. As they line up on the street, the elves cast fireballs towards the mage, who responds by protecting himself with a magic shield. The werewolves shoot ice needles, which Hamilton absorbs in the same way. Even Slilun was able to conjure a powerful cyclone. In the end, Liam had placed artifacts around the entire city, meaning walking through the streets of the Promised Land is like always having a grimoire under one's arm. Rihanna emphasizes that even children who don't know spells will be able to protect the city. But Liam remembers that's not all. To prove his point, he asked his partner to go to the road and try using a spell called Telephone. Instantly, although she didn't know what that spell was, Rihanna knew how to activate it, knowing it was somewhat similar to Liam's telepathy. The mage agreed, as telepathy transmits thoughts, and telephone transmits one's normal voice over long distances. The master knew that the elf could use this spell because the condition to use the telephone is having a familiar contract with him, which means that everyone from this nation could use the same magic. To test it, Rihanna invoked a telephone and contacted Natasha, who heard her friend's voice from across the city. Amazed by the king's indescribable talent, the girl emphasized that he was not only brilliant with the spells he created, but also exceptional in building such an incredible city that was already at a high level of development, resembling a magic city. For his part, Liam Hamilton loved the way Rihanna referred to the Promised Land, as he was obsessed with magic. The following day, it was decided that the king should live in a flawless place, so a large palace was quickly built. After the house's inauguration, Rihanna gathered candidates in a hall to see who would become Liam's personal maids. Meanwhile, Scarlett informed the men that they could not be maids, but Guy insisted on participating and even committed to wearing a maid's dress if necessary. However, the princess was not moved by the request and immediately expelled the men from there. Just as Rihanna was about to announce the start of the selection, Susie interrupted the leader to argue that those who do not know how to perform domestic tasks should be disqualified. Pointing at Scarlett, the princess awkwardly responded that serving the master was her duty, but Natasha stated that she and several others already took too much care of Liam, and they should only participate once they learned to take care of themselves. With that, several candidates left with their heads down, like Jody, Chris, Asuna, and Lady Flora. In the end, only the elves remained, so Rihanna announced a lottery to decide who would become Liam Hamilton's personal maids. Then, the candidates opened their papers. Some celebrated, while others cried in disappointment for not being chosen. Finally, Rihanna explained that selections would be held once a month, so those not selected could try again next month. Sometime later, Liam discovered that these people had been holding these secret meetings without his knowledge. The day after, Flora had entered into a familiar contract with Liam Hamilton, following her dispatch by Palta to become the noble's fiancée in the Promised Land. Now, he was showing her the physical manifestation of magic, having paved the city's streets with high mithril. His plan was to cover the entire territory with this resource, so that in the future, people could use magic to simplify daily tasks, such as lighting stoves and drawing water from wells, and not just for warfare. Flora, however, confessed that she found it wasteful to use such a rare and valuable resource for such mundane activities. But Hamilton's idea was to streamline the routine of the populace, giving everyone free time for other pursuits they currently couldn't undertake due to these simple tasks. Understanding his point better, she considered that no noble from Palta would think of the people to such an extent. In fact, she felt life in the Promised Land was already better than in the capital from where she came. On that note, Liam shared his desire to turn this into a magical city. As Rihanna had once said, at that moment, Guy called the master to inform him that dragoons from Quistador were requesting an audience with him. Flora was startled to hear that they were dragoons, as they are knights who ride dragons and are renowned for their skills. Thus, the king of this land went to meet the envoys from Quistador. As the young mage approached, the rider's dragons began to stress significantly, and the dragoons deduced that the beasts were frightened of Liam. Inside, Radon joked that he had inadvertently triggered the survival instinct of these winged lizards. Honestly, Liam thought these lizards resembled the hatchlings of the dragon god, which infuriated the ancient creature, for although there were similarities in appearance, in practice, they were as different as humans and starfish. Amid this internal dialogue, a woman named Sheila Ostreim approached the boy with an almost malevolent laugh. She introduced herself as the 19th princess of Quistador and the first head of the Ostreim family. After feeling ill from hearing a prime number, Liam identified himself as the king of the land of monsters, prompting Sheila to swiftly challenge him to a duel. He tried to understand why this conversation had escalated so quickly, but Sheila herself was puzzled by the monarch's astonishment, seeing as dueling was a great way for people to understand each other. Liam preferred to have a few drinks and chat, but the woman was more inclined to exchange punches. Indeed, she understood that, as a man, the boy might think that the most appropriate way for a man and a woman to get to know each other was under the sheets. But she quickly informed him that he was a child, and she had never lain with a man. Thus, the only way forward was through a fight. Through this battle, Sheila could determine whether Liam Hamilton was a suitable ally for Quistador. Given that he was surrounded by 3 nations and had unfriendly relations with all of them, Liam saw no other choice but to play along with the visitors' game. That is, he was going to marry Scarlet, who was a princess of Jamile, but after what happened in Agi, it was unclear what might happen next. Additionally, Palta had sent Flora, but it was a fact that the situation between them was still quite uncertain due to the political problems that had accompanied her. Now, even though he couldn't quite understand the princess from Quistador, this alliance seemed heaven-sent, and the king felt she didn't seem like a bad person. With everything settled, the duel was accepted, so the two headed to an open field nearby, where Sheila could fight unrestrained. Speaking of which, she initiated the duel by vanishing into thin air. Not to be caught off guard, Liam summoned the Absolute Shield, which protected the user from the rival's assaults. However, the problem was that Liam could only hear the opponent's voice, but had no idea where she was. Suddenly, he heard Radon instructing him to dodge quickly. As he did so, the boy noticed Sheila wielding a massive sword. Confused, he heard the dragon god explain that this was a magical sword, neither purely magical nor purely physical. In other words, Liam deduced that the Absolute Shield wouldn't withstand a blow from such a thing. With her malevolent laughter, the adversary continued exploiting her super speed to keep the mage on the defensive. Realizing the situation was getting dire, Hamilton closed his eyes in the midst of the combat, making the princess think he had surrendered. However, Liam was actually pinpointing his opponent's position with his eyes closed through a mana mist he had conjured. Previously, Sheila's speed had exceeded his perception limits, so instead of using his eyes, Hamilton used the mist to detect her. As the mist disappeared wherever Sheila passed, the mage connected his mana and his body so that his finger pointed to where the mist vanished. Hearing the boy's tactic, the princess was impressed by his strength and decided to end the fight right there. By the way, she made it clear that she could make Liam the chief mage of the Quistador court with all his talent. But first, they might have a more leisurely chat somewhere appropriate. Without delay, the wizard took the woman to his home's backyard via the teleport ability, leaving her stunned as she had never experienced such a thing before. Liam explained that it was a spell of Radon's, so Sheila deduced that this spell was the dragon's crown. Liam didn't know what that was, but Radon clarified that she was talking about him, so the man agreed without fully understanding. Regardless, Sheila emphasized that she had heard that Hamilton had mastered several of Radon's spells, and it seemed to be true. Then, the king brought the foreign princess inside his residence and returned to the topic of the alliance. By the way, he remembered that Jamile and Palta had offered their princesses for marriage, and he wondered if Quistador would do the same. However, all Sheila demanded from the alliance was a non-aggression pact, which raised a red flag for Liam since not attacking an ally is the most basic expectation in such relationships. For this reason, he confessed his doubts about the noblewoman's real intentions, to which she replied with the phrase, "Do not act against the crown of the dragon." This was a saying passed down through generations in Quistador. Liam questioned their relationship with Radon, and the woman explained that her nation had almost been destroyed. Because of this, she was sent to the Promised Land as the leader of the Dragoons. If Liam was truly the one to inherit the power of the dragon's crown, their dragons would have reacted in some way, and that's exactly what happened. In summary, Sheila strongly desired an alliance between their two peoples. Liam consulted Radon about this, and the ancient entity taught that it's always better to have another friend than an enemy. Finally, the two representatives shook hands to seal the alliance, and then Sheila felt comfortable enough to ask the name of Liam's nation, since she hadn't discovered it even through research. Honestly, the boy hadn't chosen one yet. But as he was about to explain this to the princess, Radon appeared in his original form to announce that the country should be called Liam Radon, governed by the human who had received the ultimate authority from the god of dragons. Later, as the Promised Land began to carry the name of Radon, this quickly elevated the status of the territory. Hours later, after the creature returned to the interior of the king, the details of the alliance were still being discussed until late afternoon, and the agreement was only formalized when Sheila returned home the next day. Honestly, the mage thought the name Liam Radon was a bit cheesy, but judging by how Sheila trembled at the sight of the dragon, it's quite possible that it could deter potential wars. With the arrival of night, as Liam led the guests to her quarters for the evening, she was mesmerized upon leaving the mansion and noticing that the entire city was glowing with lights emanating from every window. Liam explained that he had used a spell called Light, unable to say where he got the inspiration, and that it worked like a grimoire extending over all the buildings. In disbelief, the Princess of Quistador ran to the windows and saw people illuminating their homes with this spell and performing daily tasks with magic. Because the entire area was so brightly lit at this hour, Sheila remarked that this place seemed like a city without night, and Liam liked the way the place was described. She asked how the mage managed to do all this, and he explained that he had found a vein of high mithril in the territory that was used to sustain the entire area as if it were a grimoire. Discovering that the king of this place even had such a rare resource, Sheila imagined that his army must be incredible, and that he must also possess magical crystals. Honestly, Liam had no idea what that was, so Sheila let out her characteristic laugh and explained that magical crystals are compared to many things. But the comparison she liked most was with dung, in the sense that it becomes a fertilizer. After all, these crystals are formed by the accumulation of mana that is leaked when a spell is used, much like the residue that remains after burning a candle. When a spell is used, extra mana lingers in the air and accumulates into magical crystals. That said, Liam conjured a light with his hand, impressing Sheila, as no excess mana was released in this movement. He explained that Radon had taught him to use mana 100% efficiently. Sheila firmly responded that achieving perfection is impossible for any human, while the boy awkwardly tried to explain that it took a lot of effort. Later, as he left Sheila at the place where she would spend the night, Liam walked through the streets and wondered if it was really that incredible to have no mana loss. Radon told him that if it weren't, the young mage wouldn't have been able to evolve so much. Indeed, normal people waste a lot of mana. Speaking of which, the dragon told the boy to try being inefficient on purpose, so Liam conjured a magic missile unsuccessfully, releasing only a weak vapor from his hand. After that, the mana lost by him began to spread through the air like purple particles. Liam thought it looked like fireflies, and Radon confessed that was poetic, for to him it was just dust floating in the sunlight. Radon said dust because the particles accumulated on the ground as they fell from the air, and this accumulation is what forms the magical crystal. Given the size of the city, some must have already formed. To find out, Hamilton activated mana detection and felt a very weak magical energy. He ran in the direction from which this flow came and ended up arriving at a place that seemed to hold something magical beneath its soil. Liam quickly dug up the location and finally found a magical crystal, but despite the mage's excitement, Radon explained that he wouldn't be able to do anything with this item, as it slowly loses mana until it becomes just a stone. Still, these crystals remain valuable, as they are rarely excavated, usually only on battlefields where a lot of magic was used. Because of this, they are also known as blood souls, and compared to diamonds of the same size, they are much more valuable. With this information, Liam Hamilton discovered that such expensive objects could become an important source of income for the nation, potentially becoming a national specialty. The next day, the sovereign summoned his brother Bruno. First, he praised the young noble's work in Agi. Second, he showed him a hole full of magical crystals and expressed his desire to create a stable production of them in his kingdom. Bruno was shocked and doubted it was possible, but Liam, having already explained the use of high mithril in his city to his brother, believed that the fact that everyone could use magic contributed to the generation of magical crystals. Speaking of which, he wanted to negotiate this resource with his brother. Bruno, not being a fool, grinned from ear to ear, aware of the value of this material. Moreover, the pattern of each magical crystal is unique, so they could become even more expensive depending on the design that was on them. Not wanting to miss the opportunity to handle such an important material, Bruno begged for a chance to profit from the crystals. Before anything else, Liam asked his ally to take a look at one of the crystals. Bruno analyzed that it was a young crystal, recently formed, favored among younger and newly married people. If you pay attention to the color of the layers and the space between them, you will see that the spaces diminish in crystals that have been in the earth for a long time, making them even more beautiful. It takes about 300 years for this process to occur. Magic crystals of this type are certainly worth 5 times more than ordinary ones. Reflecting on what he had just learned, Liam invoked the dust box, where 1 minute equals 1 year inside. In other words, a magic crystal would take on its new form in just 2 weeks inside this box. 3 weeks later, Liam returned to the dust box after waiting 500 hours with a magic crystal inside. When he removed the crystal, it had decreased significantly in size, but had become incredibly beautiful with a very clear layer. pleased with the result. The wizard stored the valuable item in his item box to keep it safe on the other side. After finishing the conversation with Sheila, Liam Hamilton sent a delegation of elf women to Quistador as a sign of friendship. Among them was his illusion disguised as an elf, with the item box in hand. From it, the mage's copy was able to retrieve the newly produced magic crystal and present it to the king of this nation as a gift. Having never seen anything of the sort before, the monarch demanded the presence of an appraiser who confirmed that the crystal was indeed genuine and must be around 500 years old. Meeting with Bruno again, Liam hoped his strategy would work. Previously, he had used silver coins to show the neighboring nations the technical skills of Liam Radon, but since doing just that would be too aggressive, he sent water to the region affected by drought. Now, he sent a delegation to an allied nation with a jewel as a gift. Bruno deduced that his brother was trying to show strength without being aggressive, which was exactly what the wizard understood from Radon's phrase, to join strength with cunning, along with the suggestion that came from Scarlet about the local currency. After this meeting, Liam received the delegation of elf women back, and they reported that the Queen of Quistador loved the magic crystal, as it could buy an entire plantation. On the other hand, Liam Radon also received gifts as a way to reciprocate the gesture of friendship. Finally, Rihanna mentioned that, at another time, Sheila would come to advise Hamilton on relations with Palta and Jamil, indicating that this alliance relationship still has a long way to go. Moreover, hearing these words, Liam reflected that he could finally take a rest. Later, while walking, the king encountered Asuna and Jody, who invited the master to an adventure once he had recovered from his fatigue, or even to stop by the guild. Liam confessed that he would not like to see his brother Albrecht there, because the man simply exudes envy. Speaking of which, Albrecht is exuding envy in his family's territory, swearing that he will not go easy on Liam when he comes back home with his tail between his legs. Returning to the protagonist, he receives affection from Chris, Slillan, and Slip-On. Guy arrives to tell Chris to stop clinging to his majesty and allow him to rest, which starts another fight between the two. After that, Liam stumbles upon an emergency meeting with Scarlet and Flora, as Quistador had made contact, suggesting that Palta and Jamil might change their movements, and the two princesses are there to share important information from their kingdoms. Liam regretted not noticing this meeting earlier, but Scarlet made it clear that the king could leave these matters with them, while the sovereign should focus on paving his own path with the dragon god. With that in mind, the wizard did another training session alongside Radon, and would love to learn a new spell today. After all, if he is to pave his own path, that path is the path of magic.